city councilor. We'll talk about how local media has and should cover these men. And since Brian covered the...
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump says that any country that buys oil or gas from Venezuela will now have to pay a 25% tariff to the United States. Writing online, Trump called this a secondary tariff on Venezuela. He alleged without evidence Venezuela is sending tens of thousands of criminals to the U.S. Trump says the tariff will happen April 2nd. That's the day he is vowing to impose widespread tariffs on all other nations. This afternoon, a federal appeals court will take up President Trump's appeal to block a lower court judge's orders to release information about recent deportation flights. U.S. District Judge James Boasberg wants to know why Trump used a wartime power to deport hundreds of migrants when the U.S. is not at war. The power is known as the Alien Enemies Act. President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, says the administration won't defy the judge's order but will continue to deport migrants.
I don't care what that judges think. As far as this case, we're going to continue to arrest public safety threats and national security threats. We're going to continue to deport them from the United States. I understand this case is in litigation through the Alien Enemies Act, and we'll abide by the court order as litigated.
He spoke to ABC News this week. A federal judge has blocked members of the cost-cutting entity DOGE from getting access to some personal data at 3 federal agencies. NPR's Stephen Fowler has more.
A coalition of labor unions sued the Treasury Department, the Office of Personnel Management, and the Education Department over sweeping access to sensitive data given to DOGE employees. A federal judge in Maryland ruled Monday that the 3 agencies likely violated a federal privacy law and the Administrative Procedure Act by giving the DOGE affiliates access to personal information that they, quote, had no need to know. This preliminary injunction prevents the disclosure of data of the union members in the lawsuit. A different judge last week issued a temporary restraining order blocking all DOGE-related access to Social Security Administration data. Stephen Fowler, NPR News, Atlanta.
U.S. negotiators are holding another round of talks with Russian officials today in Saudi Arabia. The meetings come as the Trump administration continues to pursue a ceasefire, as NPR's Charles Maines reports from Moscow.
In effect, the U.S. hopes to expand on a 30-day pause on attacks on energy infrastructure that President Trump negotiated with the leaders of Russia and Ukraine in phone calls last week. Even as Moscow and Kyiv have accused one another of violating that agreement, the White House says it now seeks a similar maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea to allow free flow of shipping. Meanwhile, President Trump's stated goal of a full ceasefire continues to bump up against Russian demands. Going into the talks, the Kremlin's chief negotiator said any wider peace hinged on the West ending all military aid to Ukraine and Kyiv demobilizing its forces, moves Ukraine and its allies say is akin to surrender. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
You're listening to NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. For the first time in 65 years, passenger trains are running between Boston and South Coast cities like Fall River and New Bedford. Riders are celebrating today's debut of the MBTA's South Coast Rail. And that includes Angela Flanagan, who now be using the train to commute from Fall River to Boston 5 days a week.
It's great to see the access down to the South Coast. I know that that's been talked about for a long time, and that tie is good for the South Coast, and it's probably good for everyone in Boston as well.
To celebrate the South Coast Rail, the T is making rides on the line free through the end of the month. According to the most recent information, 1 in 35 students in Quincy experienced homelessness over the course of a full academic year. Patriot Ledger reports that over the 2023-24 school year, 280 of the 9,769 students enrolled in Quincy Public Schools received services under the McKinney-Vento Act, which is federal legislation passed in 1987 to protect homeless children's constitutional right to an education. Leslie Bridson is the district's full-time homelessness liaison, and she says 280 is the highest figure she's seen since taking the job 11 years ago. In sports, the Sydney Celtics continue to tear it up out west. They are in Sacramento tonight. Gangrene has a 5-game winning streak going right now. Forecast rain and 45 today. It is 40 degrees right now. It is raining in Raintree and really wet in Watertown. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from ARM, committed to delivering innovative, advanced computing designed to enable worldwide companies to unleash the capabilities and experiences of AI. The future of AI is built on ARM. ARM.com. This is NPR.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. You're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, joined by UMass Boston Chancellor Marcelo Suarez Orozco, asking about what's going on with all these universities around the country under the thumb, possibly, of Donald Trump and leaders of the Skating Club of Boston. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. So we're starting the show with what we're calling the great capitulation happening all around us, across sectors. Huge media companies, law firms, universities, which have gone back on their alleged values in the face of even the whiff of a challenge from the Trump-Musk administration. ABC News, for example, and parent company Disney, rather than fight a defamation case brought by Trump, gave up their case immediately, paid $15 million. This is the case where George Stephanopoulos used the term rape about Trump rather than sexual abuse, but the sexual abuse finding was a rape finding. They would have won the case. Didn't matter. We talked last, I think it was Friday, with Judge Gertner about the law firm Paul Weiss, one of the largest in the country, cutting a deal with Trump rather than lose their access to federal buildings. This is like unbelievable. Now the law firm is committed to a $40 million fund for pro bono legal services to support the Trump administration's favorite causes. And of course, we've talked a lot about universities, a lot of them withdrawing from diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments, and Columbia in particular withdrawing from academic freedom commitment with this incredible deal they struck with the Trump administration in the hopes that they won't lose $400 million in federal funding. This is, by the way, this is to me as ominous as any of the ominous responses to Trump have been. Our number is 877-301-8970. All these acts come amid threats and targeted attacks on nearly every political and social system in the country. The capitulation comes in a nanosecond. Other than a handful of pals, a couple of corporate CEOs, a couple of university presidents, people either silent or giving in. And by the way, before you call about my Tesla, we're going to talk about that later in the show. I just want to get that out of the way. At 1:30 today, how worried are... I mean, the articles that I read this weekend said, this isn't just about Columbia, it's about you. It isn't just about Paul Weiss, the law firm, it's about you. All of this trickles down. If some of the most powerful institutions in the country, media, university, corporate, law firms, etc., if they can't stand up to Donald Trump, particularly when they have good cases in many of these circumstances, what hope is there for everybody else? Just the beginning of all the dominoes falling.
Well, you know, you say to yourself, well, if I don't go to one of these schools or my kids don't go to one of these schools, why does this matter? But this great piece, Jonathan Cole of the New York Times, talks about how we have led our university to lead the world. We lead the world. People come here from all over the world. Maybe we don't want them anymore. We're so anti-immigrant now. But you get to school here, and they talk about the great inventions, FM radio, barcodes, iPhones, Google algorithms, childhood leukemia treatments, pap smear, scientific, this discovery of mRNA vaccines, which saved us all from getting really sick from COVID. That's one thing to think about, the preeminence of our universities and what this will mean. I mean, do we want this not to happen in the United States anymore? And the other thing, I remember George Conway. He was married to Trump's press secretary.
No, or his campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway.
Kellyanne Conway. Yeah, but wasn't she the press secretary for a while, too?
Well, she may have been. She was the campaign manager
but
last
anyway,
time.
I think they're divorced now.
They are.
But he was going on and on about what a disgrace this whole thing is, and I'll read a little bit of it from his quote. He said, these law firms have a moral duty to defend the very system that has allowed them to make the kind of money that they make. These law firms are now basically so profit-driven that they're putting their own economic interests above the system. To me, that's not only morally appalling and fraught and morally fraught and just contemptible, but at the end of the day, self-defeating. And, you know, they are going to lose money if they go against him. But the
No, it's not clear. Other lawsuits are fighting back. It's not clear they're going to lose money.
I think they might lose some money in the short term, Jim. But the collective together can fight back more effectively. And that
can I tell you, this country, our leadership in this world is so weak. Were you watching the images of the demonstrations in Turkey? First of all, the demonstrations in the streets are illegal. They're not illegal here yet, at least. That's number one. Number two, it's because they arrested Erdogan, the current president's most likely rival, 3 years before an election. Tens of thousands of people are in the streets. Are we in the streets here?
No.
Are our leaders standing up? No. Silence or capitulation?
You know, I was talking about this over the weekend with some young people who pointed out to me that the biggest demonstration in the history of the United States happened when? In 2017. This is before
the women's thing.
The women's thing.
Yeah.
And what difference does it make?
Well, that's their.
Well, I thought that was an interesting point.
You don't do a one-day thing and expect all of a sudden a reversal.
Well,
by somebody like Trump.
I think some people feel that way, that the demonstrations did us no good and they won't do us any good. Okay, they're wrong.
I mean, they're not wrong about the individual demonstration. You got to be relentless is what you got to be. And the other thing is, how do these people face their families, their employees, their whatever? I wasn't exaggerating. Paul Weiss, they had I think the lead lawyer in the firm was at the White House about a minute and a half after their access to federal buildings, whatever it was threatened. Columbia cuts a deal with Harvard. What, a couple of days?
Yeah, it's not
after
even clear.
The $400 million.
It's not even clear they're going to get the $400 million back.
Exactly right.
I mean, what all these stories talk about is going to be more demands for concessions and more demands for concessions. And we talked about how the governor of Maine, who stood up to Donald Trump
a good one. Good.
In that press conference when he was accosting her for allowing transgender athletes to compete, and she said, "We'll see you in court." He has now demanded a full-throated apology.
I know. How do you like? That's his expression.
Full-throated. This is what he said on social media, and I hope she says not drop dead. That would not be a good
She's going to go to court.
But she should not do it. She should just stand tough. We'll see.
It appears she's not going to do it. And it appears when it happens here, our leaders are not going to do it. Whether you're a Healy fan, a Campbell fan, a Wu fan, all three of them, three top leaders in the state, have pledged not to back down on critical issues involving Donald Trump. It is so embarrassing. By the way, if your kid was deciding, let's assume your kid
go to Columbia?
No,
don't go.
You'd say don't go, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Exactly. If you choose between, and your kid is a law graduate, gets a job offer from Paul Weiss, or one, I can't think of the name of the other firm. It's actually
Cooey, the one that's fighting.
Cooey, something like that's fighting.
Yeah,
I'd say go to Cooey or whatever it's called.
Yeah, and they had to struggle to get a law firm to represent them because Trump was after all these law firms and trying to intimidate
These
them.
These are private law firms.
Right, they're private law firms. And this guy from Fordham, which is a Catholic school like Georgetown.
What did he do? I don't even know about this.
Well, he wrote a letter. He wrote a big piece in The Guardian talking about the places that have said they're going to stand up so far. Wesleyan, we talked about that before. Mount Holyoke, smaller colleges, obviously.
Well, still.
Delta College in Michigan, never heard of it. Trinity Community College in Washington, D.C., and Princeton. Princeton's a big deal school.
Big deal.
And it's one of the Ivy League schools. Now, I don't know what their deal is in terms of federal money, but those are the ones he mentioned. That's not very many. And he talked about...
It's not very many.
Well, that's the point of his piece,
none.
That the pushback has been basically non-existence. The sound has been basically crickets. But he does say, and I think this is a very good point, that courage in these situations is contagious, and that if they get together and they come out and collectively protest, it will matter. He also points out...
You know what also is contagious? Cowardice. Cowardice is contagious, and it trickles down. I think, as we said the other day, if you see some of the biggest, most powerful corporations and universities and media outlets in the country giving in a nanosecond, what chance do you think you have, whoever you are or it is, to resist?
But he does say one of the problems for universities is they have not been necessarily held in high regard in recent years because they've been cracking down on free speech in a lot of universities around the country. He calls it the illiberalism in the past 10 years, brought on by a rhetoric of student safety trumping free discourse.
Well, that's fine, and I agree with that, I guess. But I should say, everybody with whom we've spoken about this university thing, this is the first time this happened in the history of this country, where the President of the United States has gone after private universities. Essentially, he wants to run and it's one of the stories you read this morning. We'll get to your calls in a second. What's next? He's going to say what courses you can teach, what books you can have, what the curriculum is going to look like. Why not? Why wouldn't he?
Listen to this. My parents came of age in fascist Italy. When my father was drafted into the army, he went to the Russian front, partially because of his political leanings, survived the Battle of Stalingrad, came home to a devastated nation, told me the majority of Italians thought Mussolini was a buffoon, just as many now think Trump is. So I asked him if the majority were against Mussolini, how come he held on to power for as long as he did? He thought for a few seconds, and then he said, they shut up our mouths. I see this happening now in the United States.
That's unfortunately a terrific text. Thank you for sending it. 877-301-8970. What's your reaction to what we're calling, and what's the name of the columnist who called it this many months ago?
Margaret Sullivan?
No, she referenced
Michelle
Goldberg
of the New York Times, The Great Capitulation.
This is before there even was the Great Capitulation.
Back in December.
Yeah. Nathan Easton, you're first. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for getting me.
Sure.
I'll keep it short. Just to add to your capitulation remark, I agree because it's scary because I come from a family who they survived World War II. We're from Bordeaux.
From where?
Nazis, Bordeaux.
Bordeaux?
Bordeaux. Am I saying it with a good enough?
You mean in France?
Yes.
Bordeaux in France. Okay, sorry.
And so, at least with my aunt, the scars, the memory is very real, as to how quickly things can change. And so I see it's disappointing to see Congress not even asserting their authority. The authority that they have to make laws, to distribute funds, that's their job. And then Trump says, oh, don't do that. And they're like, okay, what we're going to see, I hope we'll see, is an influx of people being upset that their representative is not representing them. And I hope that we see an influx of new people running for Congress who we've never seen before, who are just fed up, because they can see the writing on the wall. And the thing is that if corporations, and people whose job it is to protect us aren't willing to step up, then, we have to do it, basically.
Nate, thank you for the call. The problem, Nate espouses a view that a lot of people have focused on the midterms. I don't mean to be overly rhetorical.
Wait that long.
I was just going to say, I don't think this country, as we knew it, makes it to the midterms at the rate that Trump has been doing things. By the way, the Wall Street Journal, I just got a text from a friend, and an anonymous texter said the same thing, is Robert Kraft, who obviously, as you know, has a relationship with Trump, even though I guess they hadn't spoken in a while. According to the Wall Street Journal, New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft, according to people familiar with the discussions, I can't read it because it's off the screen, essentially facilitated the meeting between Paul Weiss, the firm, because apparently they've represented the NFL, I guess, through the years. And so he helped set up that.
Well, Kraft's wife is at the on the board of the Kennedy Center, so he's on Trump's side, obviously. So it worked out well, I guess, in Bob Kraft's view. But something, what the last caller was talking about, the Democrats. I mean, we have been talking about for days that the Democrats don't like the Democrats either, and we don't have a big national leader that's coming forward to fix anything. And Ezra Klein, this pollster that he's done big stories with, all these people are talking about the fact that there are millions of Americans who are fine with this. They're fine with this. They don't like big universities. They think they're too liberal. They don't have enough, which is a good point, actually. They don't have enough conservatives at a lot of these big Ivy League schools. But the way to solve that, I would think, is to hire conservatives.
Well, a lot of people find with a lot of I read from that CNN screen on Friday, 65% of Americans, the 35, support what he's doing on deportation. We're going to talk to Brian McGrory in a little bit about what more than 500,000 people who had temporary protected status from Nicaragua, Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela. Status is about to be torn away, and they're at risk of deportation to very dangerous places. And that's fine with people. Apparently it is.
Well, we talked a lot about how young men in America, in large part because of very persuasive and popular right-wing podcasts, are with Trump as well. The women aren't, but the men are. Anyway, let's go to Aaron in Newton. Hi, Aaron.
Hello, Aaron.
Hi. A couple of quick points. First of all, In terms of hiring more conservatives at universities, I wonder if that would fall afoul of the anti-DEI move, because after all, they'd be hired for their particular qualification. More seriously,
good question, Aaron.
More seriously, I'm really terrified about the whole situation, particularly Paul Weiss, because they ought to know better. They ought to realize that they're essentially giving up the entire idea of everyone having a right to the counsel of their choosing, simply to protect their bottom line. So here's what I've done. I'm a Harvard Law School graduate. Every year at the law school, they invite many firms to come and interview students and, in a sense, give them first call on the best and the brightest. So I've written a letter to the dean of the law school saying that they ought to retract any invitation to Paul Weiss
That's great.
to come interview their students, because after all, why should you join in providing your best and brightest to someone who is willing to destroy the American system of justice?
Have you heard or gotten a response yet, Aaron, or no?
No, yeah, I just sent it out.
And you might, if you write a follow-up, you might ask him to ask the interim president of Harvard to say something about something. I mean, really, the most powerful university in the world. What's that, Aaron?
Well, I was going to say, I guess it's easy for us to say that people who are very powerful have so much to lose, but the old thing about first they came for someone else and then they came for us.
Exactly right.
Eventually we'll go all the way down the line and we'll all be at risk.
That's an excellent call, Aaron. And please get back to us once you hear from, was it Manning? Whatever the name of the dean of the law school is. I think it's John Manning. Aaron, thank you very much for your call. We appreciate it.
There has been this effort quietly, they're not really coming out of the closet yet, to take a public stand to kind of all get together these universities.
There is?
Yes, but
Who
it's a bunch of these stories, including this one from NBC News. And by the way, the law firm that is fighting is this Perkins Coie.
Yeah. Is that how you pronounce it? Coie?
Yeah,
okay.
Coie. They're targeting Trump in a lawsuit, but they had difficulty getting a law firm to represent them.
Because they're worried they'll be targeted.
They're worried they're going to be targeted. Yeah, it's like a ripple effect, but they are fighting back. I'd like to be optimistic and think that they will get their act together pretty soon.
Who's they?
These big law firms.
Why would you say that?
Because I think that, well, Ropes and Gray has been targeted too, the Boston law firm, so we'll see what they do. But I just think it will become too much. I think there's a tipping point.
Yeah.
You don't believe me, huh?
Based on nothing, right? What is the evidence that all of a sudden is going to be rising up by people in positions of power in this country?
Paul Weiss is being called despicable and craven and the biggest cowards ever to hit the map. I would think that would make Mr. Weiss feel...
Think ABC's upset that they're being called cowardly?
Well...
And screwing the whole industry?
Paul Weiss is the guy that runs the... Weiss is the guy... Who's the guy that went to talk with Trump? Weiss, right?
No, it's not Weiss. It's another guy.
The CEO.
Yeah, it's
What's
not.
his name?
I think they're long dead. The people who founded the thing. I don't know what his name is. Brad somebody or something.
Paul Weiss can't be that concerned about his name being taken.
It's not Paul Weiss. It's Paul
dead.
Weiss. It's not he dead. They dead.
I thought it was
and I'm
Paul
not
Weiss.
even sure they're dead.
Is he dead or alive?
I don't
look
know.
that up,
And it really
please?
doesn't matter. I'm not looking anything up.
The CEO is getting raked over the coals.
Brad Karp, thank you.
Called a disgrace.
Who is
from
the
coast to
chairman
coast.
of? Is it Brad, Karp, or is it no? No, it's Brad
And
Karp.
can we find out if
He's
it's
the chair
Paul,
of Paul Weiss. No, it
Weiss?
is Paul, Weiss. Trust me, it is Paul,
So there was Mr. Paul and Mr. Weiss.
And it's there's also not
they
a guy
dead?
by the name of Skadden Arps. It's Skadden, Arps is the other law firm. By the way, we've said this every day. I'm sure listeners are getting tired of it. But what you said is totally true.
What?
Why aren't they all getting together, organizations, CEOs, whatever, of some clout? Why aren't the former presidents of the United States holding a press conference? Why isn't anybody who has great power willing to stand up and fight? And there are very few. And by the way, we all know, we haven't mentioned, we should, this tour that Ocasio-Cortez and Sanders are doing
40,000 people.
is really, it's spectacular.
Yeah. And I know everybody thinks she's too left of center. I don't know. I mean, she's for universal health care. Is that considered left
Well,
of center
she's standing
now?
up, too. So I don't think we have to decide if she should be the next president of the United States right now. I think the issue is
She might
somebody
be
is
young,
standing
but
up.
she's very charismatic.
Yeah.
She's very smart.
I don't think she's much younger than
She's 30
J.D. Vance.
I think she's she's 35. Or is she 37?
Whatever. Okay, Jane.
Well, it matters because you have to be 35 to
be president. Well, she's at least 35. Jane and I don't know if you know, we just had an election like a month ago, so there's not another one for 3.5 years, if there is one.
Our staff has straightened it out. Thank you very much. Yeah. It's Paul, Weiss,
everybody knew this except
Rifkin,
you, Marjorie.
I thought it was Paul Weiss.
She thought it was Paul Weiss Rifkin. His middle name was Weiss.
I thought I saw him on TV on ABC News.
Jane in Concord, that's why we're losing, by the way. I mean, if there's any doubt as to why we're in trouble, Jane in Concord, you are next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi, Jane.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I have a suggestion and a question, but
Please.
First, with the small schools are really struggling already. You hear about colleges closing all the time. Trump's not helping with that. And if the big schools are having problems standing up to them, the little ones aren't going to be able to do anything.
Right.
So my suggestion is that the governor of Maine suggests that Maine become a province of Canada, or maybe all of New England states could become a province of Canada instead of Trump taking over Canada.
I like it.
Maybe the West Coast states also. And my question is, don't you think that Trump is using the so-called states' rights, or the states want this when he wants to, but then he's trying to impose the federal will when he wants to?
I think you're thinking too deeply. The answer is whatever argument, Jane, fits whatever he wants. Inconsistency is not an issue. Illegality is not an issue. Unconstitutionality is not an issue, especially when virtually everybody is either silent or on bended knee. Jane, thanks for the call.
The anti-Semitism thing is such baloney. Don't you remember the march in Charlottesville that was the reason that Joe Biden said,
Jews shall not replace us.
Jews shall not replace us. And what did Trump say? Nice people on both sides. So this is just baloney, the anti-Semitism thing. I don't believe it for a second. By the way, the people up in Maine are having a real tough time. You see those interviews with people in Kennebunkport and all the nice resort places. And,
what's happening?
Where do you think a lot of their business comes from?
Oh, I see.
Canada.
Yeah.
But a texter just says, for me, Canada's actions are a bright spot in all this, even though American businesses will suffer. And that was the point of these businesses, these resort places.
By the way, just so you're not alone, Zoe, our coworker, said, I also thought it was Paul Weiss. I was like, wow, that guy's a coward.
Thank you, Zoe. I'm not the only one. I saw him on TV. I thought he's really handsome, Paul Weiss, but I guess he's not that brave. And then it turns out, I guess, wasn't Paul Weiss.
Well, that's not as odd as the other thing. Marjorie told me this morning, have you ever heard of a person whose middle name was And, A-N-D? I said, what do you mean? She says, Ropes and Gray. He's being targeted too.
That's right.
Ropes A. Gray.
Mr. Ropes and Mr. Gray.
Not Miss Ropes.
And Mr.
No,
And.
Mr. Gray. Ropes is his first name, according to you, and is his middle name.
I think they're deceased. They're deceased also.
Okay, fine. Can we take a break, please?
Okay, we're taking a break. We're talking about capitulation, which we are doing big time across the United States of America. The land of the free and the home of the brave. I guess that was yesterday's news. We're going to keep talking about it for a while. 877-301-8970.
It's a fact of urban life. Cities are just loud. Noise pollution isn't just unpleasant, it leads to health problems. Hearing damage is an obvious one, but the list is much longer than that. What some cities around the globe are doing to preserve some peace and quiet. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Central Square Theater, presenting Her Portmanteau, an explosive fourth play in Boston's UFOT cycle. Co-produced with Front Porch Arts Collective. Opens March 27th. CentralSquareTheater.org. And the Massachusetts Health Connector for Business. New premium value plans can help small business owners find and offer accessible employee health benefits. Learn more at mahealthconnector.org/business.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News with Library Wednesday and Friday. By the way, Library Wednesday, we're also going to cover from afar the DOGE subcommittee hearing of the House of Representatives, chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene, will have the head of PBS and NPR before them, and we will bring you a lot of that during the day, too. Our number is 877-301-8970.
You didn't get the call to come join them?
No, but Paul Weiss is going to be there. with Ropes Gray, as they're both going to be attending. They're going to be representing somebody. We're talking about the capitulation of some very, very powerful entities. Columbia University, Paul Weiss Rifkin, the law firm, ABC News. By the way, we should celebrate some people who are standing up. Associated Press is not taking this lying down, as are some other journalistic entities. Costco, Starbucks on things like DEI. And Marjorie listed the 5 universities or colleges that were mentioned as well. And again, when we spoke to Khalil Gibran Muhammad, who now is at Princeton, I wasn't aware that Princeton's president was on that list.
Neither was I. And Benjamin just texted and said there are some small protests going on around the country. There are a lot of them in front of Tesla dealerships. That's been a big thing. And there have been, we had, I think, about 1,000 women in the street a couple of weeks ago in Boston. So they're not huge. And we had 40,000 people at the AOC Bernie Sanders talk. That was something.
Yeah, it is something. Jim in Manchester by the Sea, welcome to the show. Hi.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Jim, you said there were 2 things that you said that since I called in that I really agree with. It's number one, it's cowardice, because these wealthy organizations, wealthy corporations, and these presidents of these universities like Columbia like being where they are, and they don't want to basically lose that position. And what I'll say about Columbia, it's interesting because the supervision of their Middle East Studies department was done supposedly under the guise of anti-Semitism. Once you cave on one thing, they're going to go for more. And you can be sure that their gender studies programs, their Black history programs will probably, the government's going to probably come to supervise them as well.
I think they're going to. I mean, also they're going to go after everybody. I mean, when they target who they target, and I assume it was strategic. When we were speaking to Khalil Gibran Muhammad the other day, he said one of the reasons they from Princeton may have targeted Columbia first is not just because they were so high profile during the protests, but because their endowment, which we read over the weekend, is $15 billion, which is not nothing. You say may be restricted in some fashion.
Yeah, I read that this weekend.
So they may have targeted some.
They may not have the freedom to spend it any way they want, but I think they could probably spend some of it.
Yeah, maybe, but Jim, I think it not only empowers the Trump people to go after more, it disempowers, I think, the people who haven't been gone after yet, but will be, in terms of the capitulators before. So in every angle, it is bad for everybody, trickling right on down to real, ordinary people like us and you. Jim, thanks for the call.
Here's Chris on the North Shore. I was a professor at Columbia until recently. The abject cowardice of the administration to protect its students and faculty is revolting, as it is unsurprising. It is a corporation that pretends to be an educational institution. This just publicly ripped the mask off that illusion. As a former employee, I cannot help but thrill to watch it burn. As an academic, I know enough to know how deeply terrible this is for the rest of academia, education, and society. Trump will rule over the ashes of a once great society.
By the way, we mentioned Robert Kraft before facilitating the meeting between Paul Weiss, Rifkin, and either, I don't know if they met with Trump. They may have met with Trump, but somebody in the White House. Someone just also texted, remember, he said he's a Columbia graduate, Kraft is, the father, Robert Kraft, and said he was going to stop making any contributions as a result of the anti-Semitism on the campus. So he's been involved in things there. Are these law firms that are resisting?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Our colleagues gave us a list and it's worth mentioning. Do you want to read them?
Perkins and Coey, we mentioned them before. Kecker, Van Nest, and Peters, Covington, and Burling.
Yeah. Those are separate people.
Yeah, I guess they're big. I got that now, Jim.
You got it now?
Yep, I know they're not. I know Covington and Burling are not one person.
We're trying to get Paul Weiss on the show, and he's unavailable at the moment, but we're getting Paul Weiss Rifkin on tomorrow.
And we don't know yet if Mr. Paul or Mr. Weiss, if they're still with us.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters because they aren't the ones who went to the White House.
Well, if they're dead, Jim, they can't be coming on the show.
Well, that's true. I don't think they're coming on anyway. So where are we going next, friends? Mark in Boston. Hello there. Welcome.
Hi, this is really interesting to me. In the Reagan years, when Ronald Reagan was elected, the Cold War was still going on, so that was the main thing. But there was, these cultural, political things were also starting to rise up then. Anyway, cut to the chase, man. Back then, we started doing stuff, like exposing what the Strategic Defense Initiative was really about, and we went down to D.C. and we exposed things down there. I was in some Columbia demonstrations in the 1986 and 87. We were building for something called No Business as Usual Day to, again, expose Cold War and war.
But Mark, is your point that this is about to be happen again?
And none of the university presidents, none of those people got involved. You can't rely on them. You cannot rely on these people. They'll never do it. In fact, your Democratic Party's not going to do it either. Citizens are going to have to do it. We have to educate each other all over again.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with you, Mark. Just so far, the uprising from the people has not exactly risen. Mark, thanks for the call.
One of the texters reminds us there's a day of action planned for Washington, D.C., April 5th.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about that. We got to find out more about that, what exactly that's going to mean. But again, we had the biggest demonstration ever in Washington.
Yeah, but that's, with all due respect, the notion that some people you were speaking to said, 800,000 people were at the Women's March, and they didn't get what they wanted. Well, no one's ever gotten what they wanted, to my knowledge, based upon one action. It's got to be relentless, and there's no relentlessness. There's no nothing.
All right, later in the show, we're going to talk about Jim's action on his Tesla.
We are. So I was against this. We're doing it at 1:30. We're going to talk about whether I have to sell my car.
And you had a brilliant idea for how to solve
the problem.
I know.
Don't tell people yet.
It is a brilliant idea. It is a brilliant idea.
It's a business opportunity.
Your ship may have come in on this one, Jim.
Yeah.
But right now, we're going to talk with Brian McGrory, former editor of the Boston Globe, now running the journalism department at BU. We're going to talk to him about Trump's first 60 days, as well as naming Johns in this prostitution case, this ring, that their names were revealed, at least some of them, in court. Is this the right thing to do? You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, on a remote Welsh island, a lottery winner uses his earnings to bring his favorite musicians back together. They're also former lovers. What could go wrong? It's the plot of the new movie, The Ballad of Wallace Island. Its stars join me, and it's radio on the edge as we get a jump on the ISU World Figure Skating Championships in Boston. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Advocates, the human services provider helping individuals facing mental health, substance use, and other life challenges, is now hiring clinicians. Learn more about their supportive culture and open positions at advocates.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. Joined now on Zoom by Brian McGrory. Brian's the chair of the Boston University Journalism Department, former editor of the Boston Globe. Hello there, Brian.
Hello there, Jim. Hello there, Marjorie. How are you guys?
Well, we're good. We're good, Brian. We were just talking with our listeners about these law firms capitulating to Trump. Paul Weiss down in D.C. and these universities, Columbia being at the top of the list, kind of rolling over very quickly. I think the columnist for the Globe, Michelle Goldberg, called it the age of capitulation back in December. New York Times, age of capitulation, something like that. What do you make of it?
And media, ABC,
media too.
Other
That's right.
places.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to throw those three categories in. I mean, the Washington Post and the LA Times being two of the prominent ones on the media front, these really high-powered law firms. I just had lunch with Paul Weiss the other day ago. Really, really good guy. And universities, which are, this is sort of horrifying watching them fold up like tinfoil as they are. So, yeah.
So hold on. Did you have lunch with him?
Let's not.
What did he have to say? Did he explain himself? I wasn't sure if he was dead. I wasn't sure if he was Paul or if he was Weiss, but you have the scoop, Brian.
Yeah, I think Paul and Weiss are no longer with us.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Brian, have you ever seen? I mean, I have to say, I'm not an historian. I think that's fairly clear. Not only the breadth of capitulation, but the speed of capitulation from institutions that have enough money and enough power not to capitulate. I've never seen anything like this ever. Have you?
No, never. And look, I think if you're in the positions that we're in, you sort of assume that when you have the money that Jeff Bezos does, or you have endowments that are measured in billions of dollars. I mean, you're talking about the Columbia endowment at 15 plus billion,
yeah.
like not enough. UPenn is what, 22 billion or something like that. You would think that that many billions of dollars and all of the dozens and dozens of billions that Bezos has gives you the ability to say, screw you, and we're not bowing down to anybody at this point. Like, why have an endowment of $15 billion if you're going to just roll over for a president who's making, what seem like absurd demands of you? And, I get Larry Bacow from Harvard. I believe he told the Globe in a very good story a couple of weeks ago that much of the endowment is actually in restricted funds.
Yeah.
But are you telling me, Marjorie, that if you went to...
You don't mean Bacow. Bacow's gone. You mean Alan Garber, right?
No, it was Bacow talking to the Globe.
I see. Former president. Okay, go ahead.
If you went to the people who gave you money, donated money, contributed money for your endowment and said, we are in an extraordinary moment right now, and we need the ability to spend the money for the next couple of years in the way that we deem most necessary, I would think that people would give you that kind of authority. Or if you went to
alumni,
an emergency fundraising campaign among alumni.
Yeah.
And, what was it? 400 million was at stake at Columbia?
Yeah. Yes.
If you went out and said to 200 people, we need 2 million from each of you, and we really need this to match this extraordinary moment, I have a hard time imagining that they wouldn't be able to come up with that kind of money at that time.
So why do you think then? Because I thought that too. There's so many people that are loaded that went to Harvard and Columbia and schools like that.
Maybe it's not just to avoid financial pain. Maybe they've done a calculation they're going to benefit from something like this. Maybe Paul Weiss is going to get more business than it would have otherwise gotten.
I would leave Paul Weiss aside for a minute, Jim, because look, law firms, you're a lawyer, right?
Sort of. Yeah.
So this is not a shot at you. Law firms are about making money.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are about money in a way that universities ideally are not. So law firms care very much about the bottom line. Paul Weiss had revenue last year of $2.6 billion. Like that's just extraordinary to think about. So that's a bit different. But if you're in a university environment, you'd like to think that the ideals of a university, the principles of a university truly matter, and you're not going to fold up as quickly as they did.
Well, I would say that I know this is not a universally applicable, but here's how I felt about DEI. So as of the moment, I feel like this. The vast majority of entities, powerful entities that folded on DEI, were just waiting for the first opportunity to fold on DEI, and they did it because they had no choice after the murder of George Floyd. And maybe it doesn't apply in every circumstance here, but if you capitulate after a long fight and you have no alternative, okay, maybe we'll say you had no choice. When you capitulate almost before the ink is dry on the executive order, that suggests to me that you decided you wanted to do this all along or was beneficial to you. You mentioned, well, couldn't they make up the funding at Columbia? Well, maybe they've been promised a ton of money from wealthy, very conservative donors who are saying, if you do go along with the Trump administration's anti-academic freedom positions, we'll give you another $100 million. Who knows? It was just too quick and too easy and too facilitated for me to suggest that they didn't want to do what they're doing. So
I agree for the most part about that, Jim. It tells me maybe a variation of what you're saying is perhaps universities, perhaps other entities believed in the principles of DEI, but perhaps the principles were not deeply held.
Yeah.
And they weren't deeply enough held to withstand, the threat of a loss of $400 million or something like that. Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because our team is so juvenile that the joke that they just typed on our screen for Paul Weiss is going to have to, this for our younger listeners, you have to Google this. It's an old joke from an old comedian. Paul Weiss is going to have to hire Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe to get out of this pickle. So that's the note they just, even Brian's laughing a little bit. Thank you for your contribution to the show, colleagues. Go ahead.
One of the things about DEI, though, that people have talked about that it may not have been held in people's hearts as it might have been, but that people ridiculed the programs. The little animated cartoons that were going to try to teach people in the office, and you had to go to these things in different places for 2 hours or 4 hours. There was a lot of thinking that.
Well, you and I did some of that ridiculing.
Yeah,
we believe in DEI. The fact that you didn't like the message or how it was delivered,
but I think that was part. That was part of it. Maybe a small part of it, but it was part of it.
You're being too kind to the people, the capitulators.
There is, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your bickering, but there is somewhat of an irony here, if irony is used right here. Paul Weiss actually has as a stated principle attached to their firm that they do care about bringing in partners from all walks of life, all ethnicities, all socioeconomic levels. That was written in 1963 from what I've read. So this has been long held by Paul Weiss, and that they have bowed this quickly and this forcefully is, maybe it's not shocking because it is, as you say, about the bottom line. It is about money, but you would think they might have put up a little more of a fight on this.
So when's the column on Paul Weiss coming out? It's pretty obvious.
I've got to fact check with him, make sure I have the interview right. Yeah.
We're talking to Brian McGrory.
Okay.
I asked you before, have you ever seen this level of capitulation in history? Have you ever seen a first, I don't know how many, 60 plus days of any president's administration that is this active? Forget how horrible so much of it is. This active, so many. I mentioned on Friday on the show, it was 11:45, and by 11:45 they already done three major things, three major meetings or pronouncements by 11:45 on Friday. This is after a former president, Biden, who we didn't see for weeks at a time. You ever seen anything like this?
No, obviously not. I mean, Trump won, first term Trump, 2016 to 2020 was entirely different. It is interesting. I was listening to a podcast with Caitlin Collins talking to.
Oh, yeah, I heard that.
On the way in. He was saying that if you covered Trump 1, that you were far better prepared to cover this one. And obviously she was there. She's there now. It's hard to disagree with her. But Trump 1, he didn't so much govern as he tweeted. And what people were reacting to was his outrage of the day on Twitter. But when it came time to actually governing, he had a mostly normal group of people running the agencies and doing mostly normal things and trying to keep him in check. This is entirely different. The tweeting is about the governing he's already done. And what he's doing now are these massive, massive moves. I mean, shutting down USAID and gutting the education department and, gutting HUD and doing whatever else. And the retribution that we're seeing is, the news media did, I think, a fairly good job warning the public about how Trump would seek retribution against his enemies. I don't think anybody imagined it at this scale. I mean, when he's going after big law firms now like Paul Weiss and the others that Marjorie
botched the names of. Okay, it's okay.
There is not even anything pretend on his part that there's a larger principle here. This is to exact revenge for what he believes they did to him.
And speaking of USAID, I just want to bring up the detail too, that there was a story in the Times talking about how the person that's running the place now, some Erica Carr, told everybody they had to show up at 9:30 in the morning. I think it was, I'm not sure what morning of the week it was, to either shred or burn documents from USAID, which is not normally done unless a hostile country is coming in to invading where those documents are kept. And they're going to do this. It's probably illegal, according to the story, but they're doing it because they think these documents might in some way harm the Trump administration. I mean, that's the level of detail of thinking like this Project 2025 has shown. It's like their calculation for all these years for abortion. They get to the Federal Society aside and get these people on the bench. It shows a level of, I mean, they've been planning for 4 years, right?
And one thing I couldn't get my head around, Marjorie, on this was that USAID is located in the Ronald Reagan building in Washington, where presumably most of the documents are. Where were they going to burn this stuff?
I don't know.
Are they going to go into the lobby and have a bonfire? And what is a burn bag? I mean,
I don't know what a burn bag is either.
Cambridge. Like, what is this? Who even knows about a burn bag? This is crazy. But do you get my point about Trump 1 was about tweeting. Trump 2 is about governing. Yeah. And that seems to me to be the big difference here. He has learned how to govern, and he has put the people around him who are willing to do it, and they bring out his worst impulses, not his, they don't try to stymie them in any way at all.
When you say, do you get my point, you mean, why didn't you compliment my point? Is that what you were trying to say a second ago?
You know, I look, Jim.
Okay, fine. That's exactly what he meant. So, was there, somebody called in with a story the other day about how a guy voted for Trump. This is, I can't even say this. A guy voted for Trump. His wife was deported last week. He was upset that his wife was deported, but said if there was another election today, he'd vote for Trump. Yeah. 500,000 people from
I don't think he was that upset about the wife being deported.
Right. From Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and what's the one? Oh, Nicaragua had temporary protected status or that humanitarian parole thing. All of it is about to be revoked. Some of them returned to countries which are going to be very dangerous for them. Is that going to trigger any concern by the people who continue to think Trump does no wrong, or is that just naive on my part?
So the question for me is, like, what happens in Michigan? Michigan is a state that really stands out on this because there's a large Arab population in Michigan that actually voted for Trump.
Yeah.
And now he is, proposing that Gaza turn into a Trump resort, and that, he is as solidly behind the Israelis as any president could possibly be. Are they looking at him and saying, what did we do? And I don't know the answer to this. I haven't seen polling out of there. And if you could actually look at this one state at a time and realize if there's regret or not. I mean, you do know from following the polls that there has not been the kind of slide away from Trump that people in states like ours might think have occurred. I mean, for the most part, a lot of people are shrugging and saying, well, this is what we expected. We knew this was going to happen. So I don't know.
I do have an answer on one thing, Brian.
What is it?
They're meeting in the lobby 9:30 tomorrow morning at the Ronald Reagan
building everything?
To get the burn bag party going. 9:30 tomorrow morning.
But you still don't know what a burn bag is.
I do not.
Okay, fine. All right.
So, we have been talking about this brothel, organized brothel thing where people had to give their information, apparently get references and tell people where they worked and everything.
References.
And talking about whether the Johns would be identified. Now that they have been identified, one of them is someone I used to be a source of mine because he used to run the Massachusetts Teachers Association. Paul Toner is a second-term city councilor in Cambridge, and you know him as well.
I do.
So were we right, those of us in the press, to run the names of these men?
Globe and BUR were the two entities that made the request of the SJC or whomever that the names be disclosed.
So it's a complicated, it's a really interesting question. I think it's a complicated answer. My biggest problem with all this is that I think that prosecutors were disingenuous and that prosecutors went out of their way, a little bit at the state level, a little bit at the federal level. There are two jurisdictions involved because the main runners of this ring were charged federally, and the men who took part in the ring were charged locally. And they made a great point of again and again and again talking about the prominence of the people who availed themselves to this ring and how we are going to be shocked at elected officials and high-level government lobbyists and really important people in the community. And what we're seeing from 20 people who have been named so far,
23,
is that the most prominent is a second-term Cambridge City Councilor, and what we're seeing more of is, the technician from Brigham and Women. And what has happened here is that prosecutors have sort of baited the news media and baited the public into thinking this was going to be something incredibly more newsworthy than it may actually be. That said, you flip it around, advocates for these women, and they do a really good and effective job, and it's the right thing to do, are saying that the only real deterrent is public exposure, and we need to nip this at the supply level. And so that one's hard to argue with, but it's complicated.
I think you're leaving one thing out of this that I think were you not the editor of the Globe when that fabulous series on the secret courts, these magistrate level hearings?
Yeah, we were.
It was a fabulous series. And my understanding is one of the reasons why either the SJC, Supreme Judicial Court, ordered that the proceedings be public, or that BUR and the Globe asked they be public, is the history, according to the brilliant Globe reporting on this thing. By the way, these are the only state in the country that's got these sort of little secret courts. The magistrates don't even have to be lawyers who are deciding the probable cause thing. You told great stories of prominent people. A judge who took a Rolex watch from a conveyor belt at the airport,
the TSA
was never
thing.
charged. Another politician, I think from Quincy, same deal. So I think the argument went, Brian, that because of the history of, they don't call them secret courts, but the history of these secret courts is the only way to convince the public that something shady was not going on, was to shine a light on it. That's a pretty powerful argument, isn't it?
No, you're absolutely right. And look, that was a really, really strong, award-winning series. Patty Wen and the Spotlight team at the time. Yes. Yeah, and you're right. And that is a further complicator here. But look, I still think, even with this in place, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. Did prosecutors overstep where they are or what they have by talking about the prominence of the men involved, and should that even matter?
Why should it matter? I mean, these are frequent flyers, from what I understand. The 28, 5 more on Friday.
What is it, 400 texts or more?
I think that's the threshold above which. So it isn't like they did a casual user. I'm not defending a casual user, but I think.
Well, I often thought the references thing has been unexplained. You need references to go.
They do,
higher, to get involved with.
Yes.
Whom do you ask for references for something like this, or what does that mean? I thought that was so strange.
I'm just curious. Would you advocate? And maybe I would. Just releasing the name of every person that used this service.
I would.
Well, see, I do think. I mean, we've gotten in debates about this. A lot of women, think that you want to be a sex worker, be a sex worker. But I'm not sure that there isn't massive exploitation and there aren't a lot of troubles with a lot of sex workers. So I'm much tougher on this. I would name the.
I'm with you.
I would name the Johns.
You would. You'd name them all.
Yes.
Yeah. How about you, quickly?
I think it would be fair to name them all and just have prosecutors throw it all out, then do what they've done.
Before you go, the founder of Paul Weiss, Randolph Pohl, as you know, died in 1956.
Okay.
So in what state was he at lunch last week? What was that like? It must have been odd for you, Brian.
I'm the one who saw him.
What?
It was a fairly dull lunch. I would confess that.
He had very little to say.
And I ended up picking up the check.
Okay.
Brian McGrory, it's great to see you. Be well.
Thank you very much.
Brian McGrory.
I'm always on top of my game, Brian.
You
can
are always.
count on me.
Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you
and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, ranked the #1 public university in New England by U.S. News & World Report. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu. American Experience examines the story of a decades-long fight for equality and accessibility for people with disabilities. Don't miss Change, Not Charity, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Tomorrow night at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head of Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio. We talk with Amherst College professor Elon Stavans about how Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum is navigating U.S.-Mexican relationships with Trump, who called her tough.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Trump administration is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to block a ruling to rehire thousands of federal workers who were dismissed as part of President Trump's cost reduction measures across the federal government. Separately, politics, race, and Supreme Court precedent are all at issue today in another case. The nation's highest court is considering a voting rights case today involving Louisiana's congressional redistricting following the 2020 census. NPR's Nina Totenberg reports a Louisiana case is nearly identical to a 2023 case from Alabama.
Louisiana's population is roughly 30% black, but after the census, the state legislature drew new congressional district lines that provided for only one majority black district in a state that has 6 congressional seats. So, after the Supreme Court ordered Alabama to create a second district where black voters had a realistic chance of electing the candidate of their choice, the Louisiana legislature read the handwriting on the wall. The legislature itself drew a map, this time with 2 predominantly black districts. That didn't end the case, though, because a group of self-described non-black voters went to court contending that the new redistricting amounted to racial discrimination. Nina Totenberg, NPR News, Washington.
Israel is considering a major ground invasion into Gaza. The goals are to fully occupy the territory within a few months and establish Israeli military rule over Palestinians there. NPR's Daniel Estrin in Tel Aviv spoke with 2 people who reviewed the plans.
Both people spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss the classified military plans. They said the plans would have major forces occupy Gaza, pushing Palestinians into a small zone designated for civilians, and that Israel is examining options for the military to take control of distributing food at a minimal caloric amount. Both people who reviewed the plans said it was unclear if or when the plans would be carried out, or if they were a negotiation tactic to pressure Hamas to release more Israeli hostages. The military said it would not comment on future operational plans. It has announced it's mobilizing another army division for ground operations. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Film star Gerard Depardieu is on trial in Paris for allegedly sexually assaulting 2 women on a movie set in 2021. The 76-year-old may be best known around the world for his roles in films such as Life of Pi, The Man in the Iron Mask, and Cyrano de Bergerac, which earned him an Oscar nomination in 1991. However, today, the global awareness campaign against sexual abuse, the Me Too movement, was in full display outside the Paris courthouse. Heard via the Associated Press, a group of young women protesting Depardieu before he arrived for his trial. More than 20 women have publicly accused Depardieu of sexual harassment or attacks. He has denied the allegations. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. After 15 years, a program on Cape Cod that teaches mindfulness skills to children in schools shutting down. Since its founding in 2010, Calmer Choice has taught an estimated 45,000 children across Cape Cod how to breathe deeply in the face of stressful situations. The program also serves adults. In recent years, the program has had trouble raising its annual budget of nearly $1 million, but until now, had managed to survive. Executive Director Sarah Mannion says President Trump's looming cuts to federal education grants created a gap that was too big to fill.
Frankly, what we are feeling right now is deep sadness, a lot of grief for losing this work for ourselves and for the community and for our schools. We are so aware that we are in the midst of an escalating mental health and collective well-being crisis.
The organization has 4 full-time and 10 part-time employees. A team of international scientists will soon begin drilling beneath the sea floor off Nantucket in search of what they believe is a very large freshwater aquifer that could one day be tapped by and used by humans. The Nantucket Current reports that the research project, decades in the making, will be the first of its kind in the world and will be conducted just a few miles southwest of the island, where researchers will drill 300 to 400 feet beneath the sea floor to locate that fresh water believed to be there in potentially very large quantities. A lot of water outside our studio today. It's raining, 41 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public. This is NPR.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, joined by UMass Boston Chancellor Marcelo Suarez Orozco and leaders of the Skating Club of Boston, plus Trini Casey. She'll talk about March Madness. Kelly Beatty from Sky and Telescope about the sky and the stars. Hello again, Jim.
Well, I assume people know this, but the Skating Club of Boston, beyond the fact that the World Skating Championships is about to happen here, 6 of their members lost their lives in that plane crash not too long ago. So we'll talk about all that. Joined on Zoom by Elon Stavans, professor of humanities and Latin American and Latino culture at Amherst College. His latest book is, cross your fingers, Marjorie, is Lamentations of Neahualcoyotl. Is that close? He's applauding. I am so proud.
Close.
I stayed up all night. It's a retelling of one Aztec ruler's writings, which Ilan has retranslated without manipulation by Spanish influence. Ilan, it is great to have you. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you. Such a joy to be here.
Well, before we get to the poems, what a character that you wrote a beautiful introduction talking about this guy, kind of a cross between the biblical figures, King David and King Solomon. King David also sent his lover's husband off to get killed. I guess this was better watch out, I guess, if you get involved with the king. But you talk about the Aztec civilization. So tell us about this king.
With enormous pleasure. Neahualcoyotl is a major figure.
You got that right, by the way, Ilan. I just want to tell you got it exactly right.
Neahualcoyotl.
Very nice.
Such a beautiful name. It means hunted coyote. And he was arguably the most important thinker and poet and a ruler, but also an urban planner just about 50 years before the arrival of the Spaniards. A man from whom we know a lot, but always filtered through a variety of reports. We think we have some poems that he wrote, but it's possible that they were members of the court that produced them, and then they were translated into Spanish. So his words have filtered through to the future in a rather complicated way, but a major thinker that is important to recover in this time of darkness.
You were drawn to his story when you were a little boy in Mexico, I know. And why does this story, or why do these stories matter now to us in your estimation?
When I was growing up in Mexico, he was already a major figure. There are monuments. There's an entire neighborhood called after Neahualcoyotl. And I think it is high time to go beyond the period of the European colonization and see what happened in the Aztec past and appreciate it not as victimhood, but for its contradictions, all the challenges that it faced, but all the achievements. And I think we can do that in a variety of ways. And poetry is a wonderful resource to try to grasp those contradictions in life, and this is a superb poet.
But you also, in the introduction, talk about his rule as the age of enlightenment, that there was a lot of, he was monotheist, correct me if I'm wrong, got rid of human sacrifices, was also apparently tolerant toward gays.
That's what we think. Might it be, Marjorie, that we are inflicting too much of the present perspective on the past? He was, according to the Spaniards, a forerunner of transformation, a revolutionary figure who was welcoming, even before they arrived, to their vision of monotheism. He apparently was against slavery. He was a kind of Abe Lincoln figure. But my fear, as I stated in the introduction, is that all these filters that have enabled us to hear his voice adulterated might have also transformed that voice, and maybe we are applying too much of the present perspective. Still, the power of those poems is such that it is important to use them at the very least to reflect on how we hear the past, what we learn from the past.
Could you read us one of the poems there, Ilan, if you would?
With great pleasure. This is a poem called An Urn, a Spear, a Plumage. Why do things break? Life shatters us and we fragile creatures collapse. Where do all the pieces go? Where they belong, the sea. An urn, a spear, a plumage. Death exists within us. The sea isn't our enemy. It waits for us. Let our possessions return to their original source, allowing our fibers to sound like the river. An urn, a spear, a plumage. What we have is on loan, its existence illusory. We belong to the sea. Its arduous labor of birth reconstructs us until things break again and again. Beauty is evanescent and truth unremitting. Don't be fooled by appearances. Though it be jade, it can be broken. Though it be gold, it is crushed. Though it be quetzal feathers, it is deceitful. We pass mindlessly by, a flash of light, bookended by darkness. An urn, a spear, a plumage.
I particularly love the first stanza. It seems so relevant today about life shattering people, and we're fragile and we collapse. But I wanted to ask you about the language you were translating from, because this is not easy to translate and to try to keep the language and just to try to, I mean, you have to become a poet yourself.
Pronounce the language, will you first? Because I can't. I've tried. Pronounce the language.
The original language of Neahualcoyotl was Nahuatl.
Nahuatl,
and
okay.
He was a master of it, though the first recordings that we have are in Spanish by some of the Dominican friars that arrived and rescued some of the oral tradition, rescued in between quotes, but also altered it. So we have him in Spanish, then it was retranslated into Nahuatl, and now we have various editions. My attempt has been to go back to the various voices that have been played around and create a version that enables us to listen to him and taking some liberties in order to do that.
That's what you mean when you said in some interview, it's not a full-fledged translation, it's a retelling. It's
a retelling.
That's yes. A retelling.
And by retelling, I mean, I am trying to rescue the essence of the poems, the worldview of Neahualcoyotl, and bring it back to us in order to see who ruled, what kind of character those rulers had in the past, and how do they compare to our present?
We're talking about this book. It's called Lamentations of Neahualcoyotl.
And we should mention
he was kind.
I think I read he was born in 1402, lived to 1470, so that's the time period we're talking about. The relevance remains, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's it? The little kids I'm sorry, go ahead.
At the very beginning of the 16th century, in 1519, Hernan Cortes arrived to that great city, Tenochtitlan, the most populated city at that time, splendorous. And in a very short period, that metropolis was destroyed. Buildings of churches and other Catholic entities were done on top of pyramids, so that the culture that we have is an imposition. The Aztec temples are underneath the Catholic structures. And that tells a lot about how Mexican culture lives with what has come from abroad, but in the basement, so to speak, still connects with its roots.
By the way, the book comes out tomorrow, we should say.
And just one last thing. I was saying before the show to one of my colleagues, Zoe, that when in school, what you just learned that Cortez conquered the Aztecs, like it was a great thing. You know, right. we didn't really hear what happened to the Aztecs, and I guess that is really a tragic way to teach it.
That is exactly, Marjorie, why I was so connected with doing this. I wanted us to hear another voice and only see the voice of those who subsumed, who oppressed that culture. The previous culture was equally contradictory. There was slavery, there was cannibalism, there were all kinds of extremes, but it was a culture that also struggled for light and for understanding, and that is what Neahualcoyotl is about.
By the way, it's also a beautiful little book.
It's gorgeous.
I should say. It's really beautiful. Can you read one more poem before we move on to 2025 here?
Yes, this is a poem called Against Fear. And it goes like this. Be strong, Texcocans. You are now deprived of self, having arrived in this town of warriors. I am a Huetzcotzincan. I was a slave once, losing my freedom. I know what bondage is. You will only recognize power if you are defenseless. Your song will not bring you joy. Flowers won't bring you happiness. Akolua are coming down, the Tepayekak. Tenochcans are surrounded. Tlalilolcans shed tears. Wisdom comes from defeat. Only after you understand your limits will you conquer fear. Be strong, Texcocans. You are now deprived of song.
That is pretty
That's great.
That is
Congratulations on a wonderful job and a beautiful, as Jim said, a beautiful book. Say the title again for me, Ilan, because I'm going to botch it.
Lamentations of Neahualcoyotl. And I am really thankful to you both for making room for poetry and for poetry that comes from the past.
By the way, and you can order it today, even though the publication date, the formal publication date is tomorrow. Can we talk about some things going on now, Elon Stavans? Marjorie mentioned that the character about whom we have been talking, the king, ended human sacrifice. There's another kind of sacrifice that apparently is on the way out in Mexico that's been a cultural tradition, I should say, at least. What's going on with bullfighting today?
Yeah, this is a major moment. Mexico has the biggest bullfighting stadium or rink in Mexico City. This government, it is the result of a long process. This government has finally, with the support of the various entities, Congress, the president, and others, forbidden the death of a bull in bullfighting. You can continue having the tango line between the torero and the bull, but you can no longer kill the toro, the bull. And this, as you might expect, is opposed by many who are very loyal and connected with an ancient tradition that comes from Spain, and others who are saying, finally, we are becoming a more humane society and we don't have to engage in sport and entertainment by killing animals and others.
I understand. I'm guessing you were on the anti-cruelty side, but it is a big, and he's nodding, obviously in agreement if you're not watching the streaming. It's a great departure from an important part of the history of a nation, no?
Yeah.
But how far?
Wait, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
It's a very big departure. Bullfighting in Spain, in Mexico, and other parts of Latin America is really an integral part of the culture. It's connected with the struggle in a symbolic way between man and beast. The bull being seen as a beast, but it has all these very aesthetic aspects, from the clothing to the way the matador walks into the stage to the dresses and other customs that people use. It's a very performative act, and many people love it. They reserve their Sunday for attendance to the toreo. But I think that we are defined by progress, and we should look forward to understanding this tradition without necessarily engaging in the most cruel part of it.
So is Mexico no longer going to be the 10th happiest country in the world after the abolition of which it is? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I just want to ask, what will this mean, though? Because there's still going to be the interaction between the matador and the bull. So what's going to happen? What will people see?
In some ways, I think the image is wrong here, but in some ways it's like going to a soccer game and everybody willing to make a goal, but the final goal is forbidden. You can't actually put the ball inside the net.
Okay.
Not quite the same, but it is. You can still do everything. You can dress, you can drink, you can celebrate, you can chant, you can see the bull and you can see the matador, but you can't kill the bull.
Okay, but the bull can be injured? Injured? Can it be injured?
No.
Or nothing?
What would it be injured by?
It's just
the
letting
matador.
the matador play with it.
Okay, that's it. Just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Can we go back from, I should have led with this after we talked about your book. We talked to Brian McGrory, we talked to our listeners in the first hour about what we consider to be this reprehensible fold by Columbia University in the face of a threat to $400 million in federal funding from the Trump administration. As somebody who lives in that world, not the Columbia world, but the obviously the academic world, what was your reaction to this, Elon Stavans?
Jim, the world of academia is in shock. It is in fear, and it's in a state of chaos and disorientation. And I am hoping that it would be able to bring its mind together and stand up to the very worrisome approach from the government to stymie free speech on campus. As a Jewish professor, I am absolutely in favor of having the other side stand up and have as much right as I have to complain, to celebrate the arresting of those that are visa holders that are on our campus because of their views on the Palestinians is wrong. It's limiting the exchange of ideas, which is what universities should be about. And I think Jewish professors and Muslim professors and Palestinians, regardless, we should all stand up for the right of others to be able to speak as eloquently or as falsely as we do. And I am telling you, this is a moment in which we might be seeing the death of the American university as a powerhouse where that freedom of speech, that freedom of inquiry has propelled us to the future. And now we have to be dependent on what the censors in Washington might be wanting or might not be wanting. This is extraordinary and extraordinarily dangerous. Even if research leads to a dead end, even if some ideas are proven to be wrong, the process of research and the process of debate needs to be free. And what is happening is now is that the railings of that free speech and of that free research are such that are putting universities into a situation that is untenable.
Do you think Columbia is the first of many, or we're going to see more Wesleyans and Mount Holyoke's and Princeton's and the very few that have stood up?
We're going to see, as we know, there are already 40 or 40 some more that are on a list. I mean, the mafia has taken over Washington. You have a list. You have to be fearful of that list. Who's going to come next? Who is going to be arrested? It feels like a movie of the 1950s.
Yeah.
It's frightening. And I fear that this is just the beginning. If unfortunately Columbia surrendered in its first step of negotiation to trying to keep those $400 million from Washington, which, by the way, according to the New York Times, it's the exact same figure of some discussion, of some attempted sale that was taking place by the Trump emporium in the 1980s. So I think if there is a leader that works through revenge to establish certain parameters, that's Donald Trump.
You know, Ilan, Marjorie has said this almost every day we've talked about this. Why isn't there, or will there be, some collective response from the vast majority of powerful universities, including yours, by the way, small but very well respected, obviously. Is that forming? And if it isn't, why isn't it forming?
Two ways to respond to that question. First, let's acknowledge, Jim, that higher education as such has been already in a spot where many Americans suspect what we do inside the classroom, as if we are brainwashing students, as if we are pushing them not to think critically. Absolutely wrong. What we do here is push them not to have our own ideas, the ideas of the professors. What we push them is to have their own ideas, to go out into the world and shape them. Will these universities come together as a group and stand up to the bully? My hope is that that is the case. And I am hearing that presidents and administrators and faculty are coming together in all kinds of forums and establishing that dialogue. On the other hand, in the sciences in particular, the elimination of 400 million or 150 million is an enormous amount that will stop research on cancer, Alzheimer, Parkinson's, so many other levels. We are the light in the world in terms of technological and scientific research. And if that is taken away, it is not only Americans that suffer, it's the world entire that suffers.
But Brian McGrory, he's not an academic, but he had a thought that particularly places...
Well, he sort of is now.
I guess he is. Yeah, that's right. He's at BU. That's right. I guess he is an academic now, but didn't come through, the academic system. We're talking about how schools that have a lot of money, like a Harvard, like a Princeton, which is not yet knuckled under, like a Columbia, which produce a lot of very wealthy alums. You could send out a letter and pleading for $500,000 from each of your multimillionaire alums and come up with that $400 million. Harvard could do that. Amherst, I'm sure, has got some very deep-pocketed. Yeah. You're obviously a small school compared to those. You're not a university, but that's what I kind of wondered about. Couldn't they?
Actually, I think it's a useful and appealing thought, but one has to recognize that in the last decade or two, there has been an expansion of the role of the alums who give money to many of these universities in exchange for their ideas being implemented. Yeah. Indoors, so that the curriculum changes, so that the university doesn't take this approach. What you used to get from the government was neutral money. You didn't have to satisfy any ideological approach, or that at least was the way it was presented. If you have to go every time to another donor who has another opinion that has to be satisfied, you are always just at the mercy of the times. And that is not what research is about.
Do you have a sense, before you go, do you I don't know what kind of interaction you have with students other than the academic interaction. Do you have a sense of how students on your campus are reacting to all this?
They are in dismay, Jim. Many of the students are about to graduate. Their graduate offers have been rescinded, some of the summer activities. They fear that their future careers are now in question. They are doubting if to go to certain majors. I think this will reaccommodate a lot of things on campus. And in many ways, you could also talk about a lost generation, at least one lost generation that is not going to be able to go into what they were dreaming of, into what they trained for 40 years or more, wanting to be a researcher or wanting to be a figure that takes the lead in the humanities. This is a very dangerous, very important moment.
Thanks for your thoughts as always, and congratulations yet again on a terrific piece of work. The book is beautiful and great. Content and cover, beautiful.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, Ilan, as always. We have been speaking.
It's such a pleasure.
We've been speaking with Elon Stavans, Professor of Humanities and Latin American and Latino Culture at Amherst College. His latest beautiful book is Lamentations of Neahualcoyotl.
I think that is really close, and he was kind to us.
Nahuatl Poems. It is a beautiful book, and as we said before, it's a fascinating. This king was a fascinating character, and the book is very relevant today.
Is totally relevant.
Okay, coming up after a quick break, can weight loss drugs actually help with addiction to liquor, to weed? to gambling, even just shopping. Nicholas Reville, co-founder of the Center for Addiction Science Policy and Research, joins us to discuss how research is starting to show drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy have benefits way beyond losing weight. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
For many, places of worship are also places to feel safe. They're a refuge. However, the Trump administration's hawkish stance on immigration has faith leaders and their congregations worried.
What are the plans if ICE does knock on the door right now?
Well, that's what I'm feverishly trying to figure out.
I'm Elsa Chang, how religious leaders are dealing with the threat of ICE raids on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Celebrity Series, composer Caroline Shaw and choreographer Vanessa Goodman present the dance and music installation Graveyards and Gardens, live at Harvard Square's Arrow Street Arts, March 28th through 29th. CelebritySeries.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browder. She's Marjorie Egan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. I can't believe they even include this. No tickets or RSVP required. GLP-1 drugs have been all over the news over the past year or so, even featured during the Super Bowl. Traditionally used to treat diabetes, brand-name drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy have gained popularity, obviously, for their weight loss capabilities in a nation where it's estimated 40% of us are obese. Joined now in Studio 3 by Nicholas Reville, CEO and co-founder of the Center for Addiction Science Policy and Research. CASPR is how you say the acronym? Yeah. Great. Whose organization researches the seemingly much broader effects these drugs are having on addiction, too. Nicholas, it's great to have you. Good to meet you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, nice to meet you, too. I'll make sure I have my microphone.
By the way,
in the right
if you're
direction.
wondering, he is, in fact, the son
of Paul.
Of our regular
That's
Paul
right. Yes.
Reville,
The
former Secretary
legendary
of Education.
Paul Reville of Harvard University comes in and tells us everything we need to know about education every week. You're going to tell us everything we need to know about this drug. But first, tell us, what exactly is CASPR?
CASPR is a new nonprofit. We do policy work and research. So we're really focused on trying to develop a next generation of addiction medicine and trying to support the field moving in that direction. There's really been a lack of effective addiction medications that can really help people in a long-term sustainable way. It's been almost totally neglected by the pharmaceutical industry. So in the past 20, 25 years, there's been hundreds of FDA approvals for cancer drugs and only 5 or 6 for addiction medicine, even though addictions to alcohol, cigarettes, opioids kill more people than cancer or heart disease.
So what's the reason? There's a lot of money to be made, one to assume, because of those numbers. So why are there so few medications available?
It's a few reasons, but I think a lot of it really comes down to stigma, actually, and the way that we, I think, have difficulty deciding whether we think addiction is a disease or something that people should just, decide to fix on their own. But really, there's a lot of genetic basis for addiction, and it's something that you can't just tell somebody to stop and expect them to just be able to have, complete ability to control.
Well, what I thought was so exciting about this, it's almost like you're talking about taking a drug that's going to make you moderate. You're not going to have 17 cocktails when you can have a glass of wine. You're not going to have the entire birthday cake when you can eat that's what it sounded like to me. So elaborate on that.
Yeah, GLP-1 drugs began for diabetes, for managing blood sugar. Then it was discovered that they reduce cravings for food. And so people would lose dramatic amounts of weight when taking these drugs. And now people are realizing, scientists have been running studies on animals and now in people, realizing that the same craving reduction that we see for food when people take these drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, those also reduce cravings for other substances. And so really, a lot of the craving and addictive behavior in our brains is all the same circuitry. And so when you reduce those cravings for any one of these substances, you're actually reducing cravings across the board. And so we're just seeing remarkable stories of patients that suddenly lose the desire to drink. They just come back from, if it used to be they would have one drink would lead to 7, 8 drinks, 12 drinks in a night. Now they just have 1 or 2 and then they feel satisfied.
Which is revolutionary, I realize, because you hear it. I mean, we all know alcoholics in our life. They stop drinking and they are drinking nothing, or
they're told to drink nothing, or they're not going to address the addiction.
But it's generally that's pretty true because it's hard to control. But this is saying you could be an alcoholic, take this drug, and have a glass of wine with your dinner at night. And
it's going to depend on the person, but that we are hearing that from a lot of patients, and there's a lot of doctors now that are prescribing these drugs off-label and are seeing huge reductions in the amount of alcohol, cigarettes, opioid consumption that their patients have. And it brings people back into sort of a balance. It's in a way, it's a rebalancing against all the sort of artificial things that we've created in our society, like sugars, highly processed foods, sugars, addictive substances, things that we really didn't evolve for. Our bodies are not designed to be able to have a little bit and feel like that's enough. And it kind of brings a lot of people into balance who are just sort of, our genes are not designed for a lot of what's available in the modern world.
Are you taking a lot of heat from people who have been in the addiction treatment, alcohol addiction treatment, I was going to say industry, it sounds pejorative, world for a long period of time, who have been preaching that you can't have 1 drink or 2 drinks, you have to have no drinks?
Well, we're not suggesting that people approach, these medicines in one way or another. I think for a lot of people, abstinence is going to be still going to be the best approach. And that's, you've seen that in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a number of close friends who just have had their lives transformed in positive ways through AA.
Me too.
But only 3% of people who have addictions in this country take medication in a given year. And that's because the medications that we have are unappealing. They don't have good efficacy. They don't work very well. And that's actually very similar to what we saw with obesity 10 years ago, where there were FDA-approved medications for obesity. Nobody had really heard of them. They were used by a very small fraction of patients. And people said, maybe it's impossible to make a medication for obesity that really works. Maybe people don't really want to take medication for obesity. They don't want to, reduce their weight. And what we saw is once there were more effective medications like Ozempic, that really the efficacy jumped up and the side effects were low and there were other benefits to taking it, suddenly the demand skyrocketed. And so I think that's what's possible here. A new generation of efficacy will bring a much wider adoption.
We're talking, that's the voice of Nicholas Reville. He's the CEO, co-founder of the Center for Addiction Science, Policy and Research, CASPR. I want to get back to what Marjorie said, either in your introduction or when we were teasing the segment. From what we've read, virtually every kind of addiction, from alcohol to shopping to gambling to whatever, you're nodding in agreement, can arguably be treated in an effective way by one of these drugs. That's correct?
We've heard dramatic stories on all of those topics. We need more in-depth research studies on all of them. So there have been a number of studies and studies in progress on alcohol. There's been an opioid study and another one starting soon. And there's been retrospective studies on other issues, but we haven't yet looked at specific studies on gambling and online shopping.
But the theory is, I want to get back to what you said was the common thread between obesity and, for example, alcoholism is, my understanding is whatever is sent to the brain by the drug basically says to the brain, you're full. You don't need any more food.
Yeah.
You don't need any more alcohol. You don't need any more shopping. So at least that's is that correct, that that's the common thread in theory?
That's part of the theory, yeah. Okay. And so there's a sense of fullness that can be created, and there's a reduction in craving. And I think it's sort of to be determined whether those are the same thing or whether there's a little bit of a difference. But we see in addiction that a lot of substance use disorders have overlap in the same population. So somebody who drinks a lot is also more likely to be a cigarette smoker. And so a lot of these systems are deeply connected.
But first tell us about shopping. I find this fascinating. Tell us give us an anecdote or two about people that just can't stop. They're buying and buying and buying.
Well, I think that there's a reward circuitry that comes from online shopping. And actually there's interesting research that suggests that when you're shopping online, you're actually getting 2 rewards. unlike shopping in person. So online shopping, you're getting the reward of pressing that buy now button and being like, yes, I bought the thing. It's going to come in a few days. Then it arrives in a few days, and you're getting a second sort of reward hit when you open the box and you get the object. And I think that can really create a powerful addiction circuit. And we've heard so many people who've said that those kinds of compulsive behaviors just sort of lessen and soften, and they come back into balance, and they start to have more agency and choice over what they want to do. And we see that with food. So people don't just eat less food. They actually, when you look at their shopping basket, they buy less processed food and less sugar food and buy healthier food. They already know what's healthy.
Yeah.
But when you see something, that a bag of Cheetos, a box of Oreos, it just feels so, that craving, that tempting kind of overrides some of your rational decision making. We all have cravings for different things. And if you can bring some of those cravings back into balance, you just have more agency in your life. And that's what I think is so exciting here.
So this is the good news so far. In a minute, we'll get to, I hope, good news that it's the drug's going to be more affordable and more accessible. But you'll tell us that. Can we get back to what we talked about with the stigma before? We've talked about in terms of mental health situations, addiction, whatever, is when America found out, for example, in addiction, at least my analysis, is that addiction was not just a problem of, for example, people of color, who unfortunately we don't seem to care very much about in the last whatever, but that there was this huge thing in the white community and suburbs, etc. I maybe naively thought this started to change. Has it changed, or is it still as deep as it's always been?
I think there's been a big change, particularly around opioids in the past 10 years. And I think you're right. I think that a lot of that has been as it was in rural communities, white communities, and just people saw basically fentanyl took over completely from heroin. Fentanyl's 25 times stronger. It's extremely easy to smuggle. It can be mixed with stimulants. It can be easily smoked. You can do all kinds of different ways of consuming it that just ramp up the addictiveness and the deadliness. And I think as that, we have more people dying every year, twice as many people dying from opioids now as did from AIDS at the peak of the AIDS crisis.
Wow.
This is purely anecdotal. It's not scientific, but it's just from living life. There are certain people, as you mentioned before, that seem to have a moderate gene or something. Yeah. They are never going to drink too much. They're never going to even snort too much cocaine. They're never going to go overboard because there's something in them that keeps them from doing that. Yep. And you can see within the same families, people who just, like you said, they abuse alcohol, they abuse nicotine, they would abuse drugs, they would abuse, you know what I mean? And it's almost like this possibly is supplying that moderate whatever to people that for whatever reason don't have that.
Yeah, there's estimates of about 50% of addiction is driven by our genes.
Yeah.
And then the other 50% is environment. And, a lot of, trauma makes you more likely to have an addiction. I got into this because I joined a mentoring program and volunteered to be a mentor for a young man in juvenile prison in Rhode Island about 15 years ago. So he was 15 years old. His name is Nick also. Both of his parents died from heroin when he was a child. He was then in and out of foster care, adopted, ran away, in and out of juvenile prison. And I've been the only stable adult in his life for the past 15 years. He's in his early 30s now. He just got out of prison recently again for, the fourth or fifth time about 2 months ago. And we're trying again to get him stable in various ways. He is now on Mounjaro, which is tirzepatide, which is one of these GLP-1 drugs. And it feels like it's been really helpful for him. And he's really given me a very personal tour of how difficult it is to find safe, stable, long-term treatment options when you have so much trauma, instability, things like that. And so the hope is that for people like that, effective medication can give them space to address some of the deeper issues in their life, some of the deeper psychological, emotional traumas.
But can they get it in the form? You wrote a piece that we read about the whole compounding thing, which my understanding was compounding of these drugs was permissible when there was a shortage of drugs from the name brand providers. And then when they said there was no longer a shortage, it became a problem. What is the status of that? And what's the status of affordability, availability, whatever?
Yeah. So all these ads that everyone's been hearing, and including the Super Bowl ads for the GLP-1 weight loss drugs, all of that, almost all of that, the stuff that's not coming from Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, the things where you go online, you can pay $200, $300 a month. The FDA has now said all of that needs to come to an end because the shortage of the brand name drugs is over. So we have about 2 months left before the FDA officially says that compounding needs to end. But there are a number of compounding companies that are fighting back with lawsuits. They're also reformulating their versions of the medication to try to say that it's a little different in this way or that way, and therefore it's necessary for certain patients. So it's an ongoing battle, but it's going to drive, literally probably 1 million, 2 million people off of these medications that have had tremendous ability in their life to lose weight, to address addictions, things like that. And if you buy this over the counter, it's $1,000, $1,200.
Even though if you travel to Canada, it's obviously not $1,000 as we've learned. So there was something like 70 million, I'm probably going to be off, 70 million people on Medicaid, I think, 50 million on Medicare, obviously a lot of people on private insurance. What are each of the three of them doing around, I assume Medicaid decisions made locally, what are each of the three doing about reimbursement for the drug?
It's been difficult. So if you have diabetes, then you typically can get coverage for these pretty easily. Then obesity is the second indication that it's approved for, and that's really been, in Medicaid, it's been state by state. So it really depends, and it's drug by drug. But there's some states that have started offering it, and some, major employers, government insurance coverage that have offered these GLP-1 drugs only later to rescind the coverage because they're so expensive. And really, the U.S., this is sort of a gift we give to the world, is that we subsidize medication for everybody else. We also waste a huge amount of it on PBMs and other middlemen. But
Didn't the legislature just do something about this this Massachusetts? Oh, you're a Rhode Island guy. Well, I think the Massachusetts legislature, we trash almost every day here, actually did something good on the, what is it, pharmaceutical benefit matters, whatever they are.
Yeah, and there's been a national effort to do that as well, but Elon Musk sort of stomped that out for some reason, along with some other legislation. But Eli Lilly just started selling Mounjaro, which costs $1,200 here, for $50 a month in India. And that's what the actual cost of the drug should be, but we are just bind our hands and we're not able to negotiate.
Speaking of Elon Musk, Robert Kennedy doesn't believe in Ozempic. You're supposed to just eat good food, which of course we don't need to do anything else. But I'm serious. That's what he said about Ozempic. Is Kennedy in his position, or Trump in his anti-research position in so many settings? How much of an obstacle are either or both of these people?
Well, it's a huge threat to the field of addiction research as a whole. I mean, there's researchers across the country that are having grants paused, cut randomly, no explanation. So just as with all biomedical research now, there's just huge damage being done to research studies in the field. So that's a big problem.
We don't want cures anymore. That's so yesterday,
Elon Musk is actually very pro GLP-1 and has said that he's been on Mounjaro. And he said that he thinks that making GLP-1s cheap is the best thing you could do for health in the country, which I actually think is correct in this case. RFK has been more reluctant. But I think the argument that I would like to make to folks that worry, okay, are we just over-medicalizing everything? Are we just having a pill for everything? GLP-1 drugs work closer to the sort of top of the funnel as you can if you're going to take a medication.
What do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, they're based on hormones that are already in our body. They're basically long-acting version of a GLP-1 hormone that we already have in our body. And secondly, they're really addressing problems at the beginning of the problem. So if they're getting you to eat healthier, to reduce your weight, you can start, so many patients, I'm sure, something like 10% of adults are on these medications. So I'm sure a lot of the folks listening have had this experience where you start taking one of these GLP-1 drugs and now you don't need your blood pressure medication anymore. You don't need other heart medications that you were taking because you've actually reduced a lot of the core problems. So I think even for people who think we need to be living healthier and developing healthier systems, I totally agree with all of that. This gets you closer. It moves people towards healthier foods. It's not just a sort of Band-Aid or a quick fix.
So we have people texting who said they're not eating as much, and they also, this one person said they weren't drinking as much either because they're sated. They're full.
It's almost universal. I mean, if you ask almost anybody who's taken this, if it's changed how much they want to drink alcohol, it's almost a universal side effect.
Well, the thing that's so ridiculous about this is we all know people that have AA has done wonderful things for lots of people, but it doesn't work for everybody, and people can struggle with alcoholism their whole lives, and it's so damaging, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to be crazy to cut down.
And we need more
research.
options. We need to layer. The best treatments can be layered on top of each other. So Right now, there's a medicine called naltrexone for alcohol use disorder. It works okay. For some people, it works really well, but for a lot of people, it doesn't work at all. It has very modest efficacy, but it's compatible with the GLP-1. So if you start to have more medicines that work on different mechanisms, where you could maybe be taking a GLP-1, also going to AA, also getting therapy, maybe also taking naltrexone, now you've built up a very, very powerful treatment set of layers for yourself. And that's why we need more options. We've only had 6 drugs approved in the past 25 years for addiction, and 3 of them are just different forms of the same drug.
Yeah, we talked a lot, including with Dr. Fauci a year ago, about how horrible the messaging is on public health stuff in this country. Does the average, how widespread is the knowledge for people who either have addiction or have people they care about who have addiction that this may be an appropriate treatment? Do people even know?
I think the word is starting to get out there, but it's not something that their doctor can prescribe because they can't afford it. And we haven't had the large phase 3 pivotal trials. And that's something that my organization is working on. Is we have a planning grant from Arnold Ventures, which is a philanthropy, to run a large-scale pivotal trial of a GLP-1 for alcohol use disorder.
We should say you have no funding from pharmaceuticals, right?
No funding from pharma and no funding from the government.
What's your website?
It's CASPR.org.
Now, before you go, we almost invited your father to call in at the end, and it was our move, not his, and he was very relieved we didn't force him to do it, but he did tweet in, send in a comment saying, nothing could be sweeter than being intellectually eclipsed by your son on Boston Public Radio. We appreciate that. So even though you vote in Rhode Island, can you settle a problem? Your father and Marjorie gang up on me during this most recent ballot campaign because they both wanted MCAS as a graduation. I'm talking to his son. Yes, I'm about to do that. Wanted MCAS to continue as a graduation requirement. Your father started MCAS in the 90s. How would you have voted if you were in Massachusetts, Nicholas?
I, of course, would have voted with my father.
That's
to continue. That is really... And I took the MCAS.
There you go.
Yeah, I took the MCAS in high school.
Yeah,
in Worcester Public Schools.
How'd you do?
I did well.
There you go.
And I think we need some way to make sure that students who are typically disadvantaged are actually getting the education they need. And it's so easy for them to be neglected if nobody's watching their performance.
Well, I'm really sorry I asked.
Jim is in favor of neglect for those kids.
Congratulations on your work. It's great to meet you. I hope you come back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is very exciting stuff. Thank you very much. We're going to speak with Nicholas Reville. And of course, he is the son of Paul Reville, who's very proud of his son right now. Nicholas Reville is CEO and co-founder of the Center for Addiction Science, Policy, and Research, otherwise known as CASPR. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Coming up after a quick break, enough time for 2 more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The year is 1974, and illegal bookies are running numbers everywhere, while running circles around the brand new state lottery.
The games were slow, they were expensive, the prizes were small.
But a simple piece of paper is about to change the game. The scratch ticket.
People would scratch them immediately on the counter.
Find out how on this week's Scratch and Win, the true story of how government got into gambling.
We knew we had the world by the tail.
Tomorrow night at 9 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Explo. Explo's Boston area summer program lets middle schoolers be architects, lawyers, engineers, and more. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. General enrollment deadline, April 1st. And Arts Emerson, presenting The Point, intimate discussions on big questions, part of GBH Forum Network, with a conversation about art and accessibility March 27th at 6:30 at Emerson Paramount Center. artsemerson.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It's time for 2 more things. I know everybody's excited about it because we get to find out if Marjorie will leave enough time for me to talk. Go ahead.
I will try.
Go ahead,
I will
do your
try.
best. What's yours?
Okay. Well, people may know that the White House has moved to turn its Easter egg roll tradition, goes back to 1878, Jim, into a chance to showcase all these brands. So just have the image in your mind. All the little kids there in their Easter finest, their little bonnets, their little socks and and shiny shoes and stuff, running around rolling those Easter eggs with these huge signs in the background, like for maybe Exxon Mobil, or maybe testosterone supplements or Viagra or something like that.
That'd be nice.
There will not be any signs up there for anything that Trump disagrees with, like, clean energy ads or anything like that. But here's the deal. They want people at the April 21st event to choose from the $75,000 to the $200,000 deal.
That's right.
That's a lot of money. And what they get for the $200,000 one is they get to have brunch with First Lady Melania Trump and a chance to talk to the press corps, and they can put their logos all over the place wherever they want. Be part of history is what the guide says. Now, here's the thing. The money is supposed to go to something called the White House Historical Association, but nobody really believes that because they figure Trump is just going to pocket it all. And who knows whether he's going to pocket it all, because the person that might look into whether he pocketed it all has been fired. One of those
the ethics guy, that's
general.
right. That's right.
That's right. So if you see a lot of signs for, Tesla and Viagra at the Easter egg roll, you'll know where the money's going.
Wow.
Huh.
Okay. So, Marjorie, you'd agree with this. I am average or above average at most things.
Oh.
I am extraordinary at two things. You know what those two things are?
What?
Making restaurant reservations and napping.
Oh,
those
napping.
are the two. So I want to talk about one of them, napping.
I didn't know you napped.
Yeah. Oh, what are you talking about?
You made fun of me for napping.
Well, I did. I'm going to make fun of you again in a second.
Okay.
You're right about napping. It's good for you. Don't do it too long, or if you do it too late in the day, you won't be able to sleep, etc. I've had 3 phases of napping, actually, and 3 reasons. First, it was a necessity. When Marjorie and I used to do a morning show at the old station.
Correct.
We have to get up at 2:30 in the morning. I also did a TV show at the end of the day, so I had a nap in between. That was a necessity. One word of caution. Don't do what Marjorie did, which was sleep in your car with your mouth wide open, and people would come over to talk to you because they saw the car, and your mouth is wide open sitting in the car. Don't do that.
Okay.
Second reason for napping is it's a pleasure. When I dropped the TV show I did here, which I loved, I had more time, so it was joyful. You just sleep for less than 30 minutes in the afternoon. The third reason started on November 5th, napping as a necessity. We've discussed this with a lot of people on the show. There's only so much of this democracy demolition one can take in one day. Solution, take a nap. And to my knowledge, I don't dream about Trump, Musk, Hegseth, or any of these people whatsoever. So for 30 minutes a day, they don't control me. So that's 3 cases for the nap. I'm going to end with a 4th case for the nap.
Wow.
This is courtesy of, you of course remember Pete Hamill, the great journalist, columnist.
Yes.
Here's what he said about napping. The replenishing thing that comes with a nap, this is great, you end up with 2 mornings in one day. How great is that? I totally love that.
It's 2 mornings in one day. Get up after your nap, and what do? You have a cup of coffee and start day 2 of one day.
And let me just say again, you'd knock on Marjorie's window. She had a Highlander at the time. Can we talk about this? It's true.
You just said it.
And
with my mouth open.
Mouth open,
yeah. Was
exactly.
I snoring? I probably was snoring,
and
too.
remember that thing we had a big deal that John Parker and you and I were doing? You forgot the show?
Yeah.
Because you were sleeping in your car.
I was sleeping in my car. I spent a lot of time sleeping in my car.
I know you do.
Put the seat back, and it's really nice.
Napping. You don't nap?
I do.
Oh, you do too?
Every day after the show.
How fabulous is a nap?
It's a whole new world, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Whole new world.
That's
okay.
it.
We're out of time. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to talk with Rich Davey, the new CEO of MassPort. We'll talk with him about the safety of flying and concerns about the Trump administration.
The news you trust by donating your car, truck, or other used vehicle to our vehicle donation program. You'll have more space in the driveway this spring, and you may earn a tax advantage. Learn more at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Boston Ballet, presenting Winter Experience. This program of dancing is full of grace, athleticism, and artistry. On stage now through March 30th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org. And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Bradley, ahead of Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio. MassPort has a new CEO, but a familiar face to us, Rich Davey. We'll talk about changes to Logan Airport, including a new bump in fees for Uber and Lyft drivers, plus how MassPort is addressing climate change and diversity in the era of Trump.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll end with you opening phone and text lines to talk about these Tesla takedown protests happening all across the country in opposition to Elon Musk and the MAGA agenda. There's one right outside Jim's house today, I believe. We're curious what you make of these protests. What you think when you see someone still driving a Tesla or worse, a Cybertruck. And of course, what should a poor, unfortunate public radio host with a Model 3 Tesla do about his Muskmobile on the mean streets of Cambridge? Call or text next on the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. is blocking the Trump administration's attempt to lift a pause on deportation flights under the 18th century wartime law, the Alien Enemies Act. NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports the court's pause will remain in effect for another week.
Judge James Boasberg last week issued a 14-day temporary restraining order barring the Trump administration from using the Alien Enemies Act as the basis for deporting people. The Alien Enemies Act has only been used 3 other times in U.S. history. It allows the government to quickly deport people without going through immigration courts. The Trump administration had sought to resume flights earlier. Boasberg says the pause on the flight does not prevent the government from making arrests or even deporting those it suspects of being members of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang targeted. Judge Boasberg, meanwhile, is asking immigrant rights groups who sued to file a request for a longer pause on such flights, known as a preliminary injunction. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News.
The Trump administration's latest appeal will be the subject of a separate hearing this afternoon. Members of Congress are back in Washington after a week in their home districts. As NPR's Barbara Sprunt reports, some Democratic lawmakers received an earful from their constituents who've demanded that their elected officials resist President Trump's efforts to downsize the federal government.
I heard a lot of other people ask, is there a plan? And it really doesn't seem like there's a plan.
This question from a constituent named Amanda during a town hall in Golden, Colorado, was one of many asked to Democratic Senator Michael Bennet about what Democrats can do to push back on the GOP agenda. 19-year-old Jackson Armenta said it's personal.
I have family that's on Medicaid. I have family that collects Social Security, and they need that to survive month to month. And so we just really want to make sure that there's a real plan.
Bennett acknowledged Democrats are limited in what they can do on Capitol Hill as members of the minority party, but said mobilizing ahead of next year's midterms will be critical to put a check on the Trump administration. Barbara Sprunt, NPR News, Washington.
Firefighters in North Carolina continue battling wildfires. Blue Ridge Public Radio's Gerard Albert III reports from Asheville that crews are having trouble with trees that were knocked over by Hurricane Helene.
Crews from across the state have struggled to contain a trio of wildfires that started in sparsely populated Polk County. Jeremy Waldrop is with the North Carolina Forest Service.
One of the big things, we got a lot of down debris from Hurricane Helene. They are working in a lot of steep, rocky terrain that's there, so that is something we have to keep in check as well for safety reasons.
Waldrop says low humidity and high winds also make fighting the fire harder. For NPR News, I'm Gerard Albert III in Asheville.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Some local professors say their leaders aren't pushing back hard enough against the Trump administration's crackdown on colleges. And as GBH's Kirk Carapezza reports, some Jewish faculty say they feel they're being used as political pawns.
Last week, Columbia University yielded to a variety of demands made by the Trump administration, which had been threatening to withhold federal funding. That includes taking steps to address alleged anti-Semitism on campus. Critics say the administration is conflating pro-Palestinian activism with anti-Jewish bias. BU law professor Jonathan Feingold, who's Jewish himself, says he's disappointed in Columbia and higher ed leadership in general.
I was deeply troubled by the fact that Columbia is sacrificing its independence and integrity to an administration that is openly taking steps in order to exert quote-unquote existential terror on universities.
So far, leaders at BU, Harvard, MIT, and elsewhere have stayed silent on what many see as the Trump administration's encroachment into higher ed. Kurt Carapezet, GBH News, 89.7.
In sports, the Celtics continue to tear it up out west. They are in Sacramento tonight. Gang Green has a 5-game winning streak going. Yes, sir. In the forecast, it's raining out there today, 45 degrees, clouds upper 30s overnight. Sun clouds, low 50s tomorrow. We could see some more rain Wednesday into Thursday, high in the mid-40s. 41 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance. Progressive is looking for individuals in a variety of career fields who want to help build a culture of inclusiveness. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers.
Houston Friday, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. I just want a ton of people are texting in asking about Elon Stavans' book. And they want to know how to spell the name, the Lamentations of, it's hopeless. So I would suggest Elon Stavans is the professor at Amherst College, who just did this translation of this Aztec king. Go to, the publication date is tomorrow. Type in his name, Ilan, Ilan Stavans, Stavans.
Not Stevens, Stavans.
And Stavans, and the word Lamentations, and you'll find it's a beautiful book, both inside and on the cover, and well worth your time. We're joined now by a guy who used to be on our show when he was young and irresponsible. He was the Secretary of Transportation and other things.
Now he's old and irresponsible.
For Deval Patrick. He is now the relatively new CEO of MassPort. Rich Davey, it's great to see you again.
Thank you both for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so you were a big political star in Boston. You left, went to New York City, and you came back. So why are you back, and what were you doing in New York?
They ran me out. No, I'm kidding. I made the joke that I was there for 2 years, and one of the skill sets I brought was helping to plan major sports championship parades, and they didn't have one in New York for 2 years. So I came home, and a week later the Celtics won. It was an opportunity. It was hard not to pursue. The MassPort team's great. I love the governor, her team, and it's fun to be home. It's in my career. I hope maybe some of your listeners would disagree, but I hope that I've tried to spend my life improving the community and the place I grew up in, and coming back to be able to do that again was just something I was excited to do.
So you have a lifetime in transportation, but not
Indeed.
Planes.
No.
So was that an inhibitor in terms of your decision making?
No, I was chair of the board at MassPort for 3 years when I was secretary, so I had a really good sense of what MassPort does and did and does. Certainly, planes is a big part of that. So is the cruise ship terminal, Connolly. We're the largest landlord in the Seaport District as well. So maritime aviation and real estate is our big portfolio. With 1,300 employees, we have $22 billion impact on the Massachusetts economy. I like to say MassPort punches above its weight.
So we talked, actually, I was just going to say, we speak to another transportation guy every once in a while, Phil Lang.
Yes.
But you had a question for...
Well, I just wondered, we joke now that he's been nicknamed the Ted Lasso of
in a loving
Boston
way, from what we're told by his
and in
coworkers.
these polls, he gets these huge numbers.
Sure.
I mean, the idea of the Cloak and Dagger MBTA and who knows what goes on in that cash room over in East Boston and stuff like that. He's Mr. Transparency. People love him.
Yeah.
So was he this hallowed figure in New York as well, or is this a new thing?
So we didn't cross paths. I think 2 months. There was a gap between when Phil left and I started there. But I've known Phil in the industry for a long time. He's a great guy. He is exactly what you see. He's an engineer. He just gets stuff done. He's no drama. He's rallying a great team. I think he's brought in a good mix of folks on the outside and kind of rallying folks on the inside. And look, after a number of years, when you're not investing in maintenance and you're cutting back, guess what happens? Maintenance isn't done and things break down, right? So I think Phil has convinced the team and the governor, the legislature, more importantly, to invest, which is great. And as you said, too, I mean, the guy, he lives in East Boston. He takes a blue line every day. I see him on the train. He's just kind of Mr. Fix-It. So we're lucky to have him. We really are.
We're talking to the new CEO of MassPort, Rich Davey. The reason I brought him up was not just for that, but when he was with us, I think last week, we talked about couldn't remember the exact percentage of ridership on the T as compared to pre-COVID. And I've read at MassPort, actually, the number of customers is higher than it was pre-COVID.
That's right.
And I also read you're contemplating 10 million more customers, roughly, in a finite period of time. In a tight space like that, and obviously that would mean, I assume, tens of thousands of more car trips daily, and that's how do you pull that off?
Yeah, so we had the highest number of customers at Logan Airport ever this past year, 43.5 million. As you said, Jim, we're expecting to get to 53.5 in the next 10 years. And the air side is not our issue. We got plenty of gates, plenty of runways. To your point, I mean, I've never heard someone say to me, hey, boy, I loved getting to Logan Airport today. It was amazing, right? Now, I've heard, the restaurants are great, the terminals are good, and the TSA is generally good at Logan, but so getting there is going to be the key. So this is one of the reasons why we raised fees, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, around Uber, Lyft, and others, to invest in both our public transportation investments with the T and with others. We've got some other ideas too. Logan Express, for example. So, you can park in Braintree, you can park at Framingham. What if you could park there and then not only get on a bus there, but go through TSA security there, get on a bus, and be dropped off on the secure side of the airport? Like, that's what we're going to try to invest in.
Is anybody else doing that?
So Philadelphia does it. With American Airlines only, but you actually go to a smaller airport and go through. No one else is doing it off airport, but we think we can do that.
So what is the president, as you know, is cutting back a lot of federal money. How much does that matter to you and your plans?
So for MassPort, we don't get a lot of federal grants. I think for the T and MassDOT and others, that's a bigger issue. But I would say this: we're watching a couple things like tariffs. I mean, Conley Terminal, we actually bring in. So for a lot of you listeners, probably a lot of the furniture you have in your house, or if you got a bottle of Italian wine right now, it probably came through Conley Terminal. To the extent that there are tariffs that might hit those, that could be a big hit for us. So we're watching that closely. But, in terms of dollars coming to MassPort, not a lot.
Weren't you denied some EPA grant that you wanted for?
We were, but it was a huge. I mean, that was under the Biden administration, right? That was not Trump.
No, but I meant you are dependent upon federal money to some degree, or at least wanting to be.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly like to get grants. There's no doubt about that. But like the average operating dollars, no. I mean, that grant was probably too big of an ask, so we went to our own well to figure out how to fund those. The cruise terminal is what we want to invest in.
I want to get back to Trump money in a little bit, but let's stay on the expansion of the place. I know you're asked all the time about a monorail, and the answer to the question is possible but not imminent. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I mean, it's really expensive, and I think, I've pushed our team to look at the cost-benefit analysis of this stuff, which is why I think, for example, looking at the remote terminal idea, it's not as costly as, a people mover or a monorail around, but that'll be part. We're starting a strategic plan with our board this May, and that'll be part of the conversation.
And how much of the lift and how much of the ride-sharing fees what's that doing in terms of the cost of expansion?
Yeah, so it's going to help us do a few things. We're building a new transportation center parking garage at Terminal E, but the first floor will also be for all pickup and drop-off for Ubers, Lyfts, and private buses, by the way, another piece. Are expanding our Logan Express services, as I said, so Braintree, Framingham, being able to run more service there, and we're actually building a new parking structure at Framingham right now. There's a bunch of those kinds of things that we're doing to improve the customer's experience getting to and from the airport.
I should know the answer. This is one more thing about expansion. Are they still conducting the sadism training with the state police at Terminal
C? That's what I was going to ask.
Or is that over with?
No, I think the funding is running out on that training soon. No, so
that's not. Is that not happening? I mean, that was one of the worst. I have to say, and I'm sure you experienced it when you
hear
lived
all
here
the time about Logan getting screamed at by state troopers.
It was brutal.
So I have experienced that before in the past, not
as
recently.
As a customer,
not recently. I think the state police have been asked to do a lot, which is not only police the place and keep it safe, which is their primary job, but then also, frankly, I mean, look, you also see it too. You see the fake placards. Oh no, I'm just waiting for my elderly grandmother, and your 24-year-old girlfriend comes out. Like
that was Manny Ramirez who was waiting for his grandmother.
So there's a little bit of that frustration that I can see, but actually the state police have gone through customer service training the last couple of years, and we've seen dividends. So our ratings in the J.D. Power and Associate list, we've gone from in the teens now to number 8.
Is that customer satisfaction?
Customer satisfaction, yes, which includes interactions with state police. So obviously, we've got more work to do, but their principal job is safety, and they do a hell of a job there. But yes, if we could have a lighter touch around the airport, I'd like that too.
But since I never go anywhere, I don't know what other airports do. But I wondered if it's unusual what you do at the Logan deal, where you drive up right to where you're going to go into the terminal, and the cops are there, and you're trying to drop off people quickly and get before they yell at you.
Yeah.
Is that unusual? compared to other airports?
No, I think different people yell at you at different airports. So it might be people in orange vests, for example, or others. I mean, again, our curb space is so constricted.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the size of Logan Airport. Someone told me you could fit 18 Logan airports, literally, in the footprint of Denver Airport. That's just how constricted we are. It's only about 1,200 acres we have. So, there's a premium on the curb in particular, and so nobody should be getting yelled at, but we should be pushing, cars through. And frankly, most cars, particularly Terminal B, which is really constrained, we've made some changes there to improve that, so the cars go in the middle now as opposed to around the curb. But it's a huge challenge for us, for sure.
But it seems like a weird setup, I guess what I'm getting at. That's what I'm wondering, if there are other people that have figured out a more less frantic setup where the people can still get to the picker-uppers, whether it's Uber or Lyft, or their family more easily.
It has to do, Marjorie, with a lot of the space constraint. I think that's the challenge, right? And we're not going to build our way out of it. So obviously, Terminal C, we made some investments in the roadway there and the drop-off and pickup now. It's much calmer than it used to be, for sure. B, we just made some changes as well. And as I said, E, coming soon, will be this garage with a huge drop-off and pickup area. Because international flights, by the way, so Terminal E serves our international flights. The whole system is growing at Logan Airport, but international flights proportionally are growing faster.
Is there any airport in the country, in a major city, that's closer to downtown than Logan is?
Not in the United States. Toronto might be close, but that's it. I mean, we're within. Yeah, I mean,
that's just fabulous.
Right. Think about it. Atlanta's 30 minutes outside. Denver's 45. O'Hare could be 4 days, depending on the traffic.
Insane.
And
so expansion, this 10 million additional flights you're talking about, more flights, also means more greenhouse gases. What's going on the climate change front? I know you care about it, and I know a lot of people in the advocacy community that care about it deeply.
Yeah, no, and a number of the advocates actually supported our proposal last week on some of the fee changes, but we also kept our HOV fees the same. We didn't raise those to encourage people to be using HOV. But to your point, Jim, it's really interesting, like 90% of the greenhouse gas emissions or thereabouts from Logan Airport emanate from aviation fuel. Right, so if we turned off all the lights and figured out a way to green the roofs and electric vehicles, which we're doing, by the way, that's the issue for aviation generally across the world. And so, we have been looking at ways we can encourage sustainable aviation fuel to be adopted, scaled, used here in Boston or Logan Airport. There's a couple of startups that are doing some work. So, I mean, that to me is the big enchilada if we can solve that. But in the meantime...
But is that even real in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, so it's basically, I think, 2 steps, Marjorie. One is it's just cleaner fuel. Think about that. And so that exists today. It's being manufactured in Houston and Los Angeles. Unfortunately, not here. But trucking that up, depending on how you truck it, it could also reduce, increase greenhouse gases. So we're thinking about that. But there are a couple small startups here in the Boston area, one in particular that I'm aware of, that is looking at true green aviation fuel. The challenge with that is like computing and whatnot. It requires an enormous amount of power to be able to make the fuel truly green. So that's going to be a big, I think, concern for us all in the aviation in the industry in the next, decade or so.
Speaking of green, we've asked the governor, Maura Healey, about this a lot, and I think she's always said it's still in consideration.
Is Hanscom you're talking about?
Yeah, Hanscom Field, because that's where a lot of private jets go out of, and they're a big problem, obviously, for pollution, and they want to expand. So should they be able to?
So
MassPort runs Hanscom.
Yes. So MassPort runs Hanscom. So should I be expanding Hanscom? I think the answer is yes, because there is data to show, although we've asked them to take another look at it, that a lot of those flights are leaving empty because they don't have a place to park. And so the hangars would allow them to park at Hanscom. At the same time, folks have asked, as have we, the proponents to come up with a number of more information and more data, which they're working on now, and they owe us probably in the summer. So that's not moving forward until that environmental process gives us more information. But as I've said to folks up there as well, I think the fundamental challenge for us is aviation fuel, and figuring out a way to make it greener is the way to go versus limiting aviation. Because at the end of the day, by the way, the FAA will not allow us, even if we wanted to cap flights at Hanscom or at Logan Airport, for example. So I think that's why we got to get our hands around this aviation fuel question.
Let's stay on Hanscom for a second. Everything I've read says the greenhouse gas responsibility, it's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, is 10 times for a private jet flyer than it is for a commercial jet flyer. So I assume the decision that you're looking at is on one hand weighing the extra negative impact of that private jet flyer versus what you talked about, the ability to house, so they don't have to fly in. So
That's right.
it doesn't seem that complex to me. And I think we were talking to Maura Healey about this. I'm sure others were long before we were, a year or so ago. Why isn't that on the table so that people could make an informed decision as to whether the benefit justifies the cost?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the questions that have been asked to get more detail on. The parking, if you will, was conceived, but I'm not sure the full data was there, and so that's what we're asking the proponents to come up with. I think there are other opportunities, maybe phasing the project, for example. The Secretary did tease that in her letter, Secretary of Energy Environmental Affairs, to the proponents as well. But at the end of the day, like, if those planes don't... So, look, if the Hanscom folks' opponents win, those planes will just go somewhere else, right? So it's not a win for the Earth. It might be a win for Lincoln or Concord. And so that's why I'm going back to, like, what is the fundamental problem? It is the greenhouse gas emissions from aviation fuel. That's what we got to solve for.
Yeah, but again, this is not my area of expertise, Rich Davey.
Well, that hasn't stopped you from asking me lots of questions over the last decade, Jim. I mean,
sadly, that's true. I mean, look in Boston, for example. Mayor Wu is not saying, well, if the cars don't go down Boylston Street, they're going to... We're trying to discourage cars. So why aren't you trying to discourage private jet use in this region? Make commercial... I understand there's certain people that are only going to fly private jet, but why not try to discourage the use to begin with, so you don't have to worry about whether it's at Hanscom or somewhere else, but rather they're flying commercial?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think one is, again, the policy of the federal government is to not discourage aviation at all. Like, that would be arguably discriminatory under FAA guidelines and rules, and then our dollars, the few dollars we get, could potentially be at risk. I think that's one. I think two is an economic play, right? There are a lot of those jets that serve corporations and companies that are based here in Massachusetts and are here in part because they have that ability to do that. For better or worse, that's what, so I think as much as we've got to balance, and look, my career, I've worked 20 years trying to get people out of their cars on a public transportation, but we also have an economic and a competitiveness challenge here in Massachusetts we've got to be cognizant of well. I think we can balance those two at Hanscom, but without rolling up the carpet and turning it into a soccer field. I think we can do that up at Hanscom.
We have a text from Brian from Paxton saying, we have a beautiful airport right down the hill in Westport and Worcester, excuse me.
Yes.
And I don't see any advertising for it on Boston radio stations. Oh. I would think more people from Framingham heading west might consider flying out of Worcester. What is at the Worcester Airport?
That's yours too. Is that yours too?
Yes, so we do own the Worcester Airport. Yes. You should go out there.
Yeah.
I love Worcester Airport. Having went to college out the Woo.
Are you a Holy Cross guy?
I'm a Holy Cross guy. Yeah. I'll be at the opening.
They've redone Holy Cross big time.
Yeah,
I think the Stigmata statue has gotten even bigger though.
Wait, where are you going to be at? What are you going to?
The Woo Sox are having their home opener on Friday. I'll be there to give out 4 JetBlue tickets. I think free tickets, by the way. So JetBlue has some really great flights to Florida, and we've got a couple flights a day to New York as well. The market's done well there. So we do advertise. We do a lot of advertising around, particularly around school break, because families are loving to go to Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, Fort Myers.
How much is the parking there?
Super cheap. I think it's $5.
$5?
$7. And by the way, you park and you walk
$7 a day,
and you walk 10 feet to the literally. There's no line. The TSA is fantastic. It is a well kept secret. So we should advertise it more. I agree. But the JetBlue has been there now almost a decade. We've owned it now for a little over a decade, and that service in particular has really done well.
Huh.
Can I one last climate thing?
I didn't even know there was a airport in Worcester.
Was there?
Oh, you should broadcast from there.
I should broadcast from there, from the runway.
I think you should broadcast from there. No, we love Worcester. We're only
I didn't know there was an airport.
One last climate thing is... one of our colleagues here, and I'm sure you know about this, Chris Burrell did this reporting on shore power, this electric power for cruise ships, et cetera, which is obviously a good thing. And I don't want to speak for him, but I believe I remember from the report that because of the denial of the EPA grant, the contention is that the amount of money you're allotting to this is inadequate to do the job that you say you want done around climate stuff and shore power. Why is that wrong?
Totally incorrect, because the EPA grant had a lot more, I would say, stuff in it that was beyond. So when we didn't get the grant, I asked my team, strip this bare. How do we get to... Seriously, strip it bare. How do we get to shore power, number one? And that was about $60 million. And then how do we upgrade the terminal to we're going to have more customers coming through. We had 480,000 cruise customers come through that terminal last year, and more are coming. And it's not the best terminal. So how can we improve passenger amenities? That was another $40-ish million. So we found $100 million in our own pocket to pay for it. The EPA grant, I would say, was going for a grand slam home run. This is a nice double that's going to get us the what Chris rightfully is pushing us on, which was the shore power.
Are you ever going to go? You ever been on a cruise?
I have.
Hell on Earth or no? Tell the truth.
Well, the
yes.
last cruise I went on was with a girlfriend at the time. I'm sorry, Jane. I did date before I married you.
Jane would be his wife.
My wife, yes.
How was that? Good?
Yeah,
not so much.
That was the end of the romance. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
really.
so Rich Davey, we've talked to Shirley Leung and others a lot about the so-called MassPort model around diversity. Could you describe what it is, and then we have a question or two about it?
Yeah, sure. So over the last few years, what MassPort has established, because they saw a real need to get folks of color in particular involved in real estate investment. So you see a lot of contractors and subcontractors and others, but investors we often didn't see, kind of saw the same old folks. And so about 10 years ago, MassPort said, look, we're going to think more favorably of a real estate project if you bring a person of color as part of your team to the table as an investor, not just a subcontractor or a contractor or an operator of a hotel. And that's worked well. We've seen a number of projects in the Seaport where
the Omni was
the Omni Hotel was one of the most obvious ones, where we have great participation, a great team, by the way, very qualified team, but a team that if some folks had just hadn't had access to real estate projects in the past.
I think it's fabulous, but the concern I have, even though you say you have limited federal money, you have two strikes against you. MassPort cares about climate, and MassPort cares about diversity, neither of which matter. Not only do they not matter, but they're antithetical to what the President of the United States cares about. I don't mean this facetiously. Do you not worry about adhering to the MassPort model and pushing climate things, even if they're not as much as some others might like? You're clearly doing something there.
Yeah, I mean,
do you not worry that they put you at risk financially?
I worry about that, but I think I've also heard the governor say a few times that Washington can't change who we are, and so we're going to insist that we're not going to change that. And so far, no one's asked, but no, perhaps now on the radio they will. But
I'm sure
we haven't.
Need us to think about
did
it.
you already, I was reading some of the text, so I may have missed it. Did you already ask about safety issues? People are
no,
because
flying?
I think a lot of people are. There's been some couple of air tragedies, near misses, that kind of thing. People concerned that the administration is going to be cutting back the FAA, and they say no air traffic controllers, but. Tell us about safety.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think one is, obviously there have been some really serious incidents, including the one where, many lives were lost in Washington, D.C. And that had to do basically, I think has been reported, is, the sort of intensity of the helicopter movements, the operations along the Potomac. Thankfully here at Logan, we have about a half a dozen a day. Those are either Medi flights or media helicopters, by the way. So they had a couple hundred a day. I think... So in terms of what the administration is doing, actually, I'm going to maybe play a little devil's advocate, put that aside. I think both the previous administration, the current administration, the previous Congress, the current Congress needs to hire more air traffic controllers. Now, the airspace is safe. Logan Airport is safe. Flying is still the safest way to get around. However, the impacts for having fewer air traffic controllers, these are the folks in the towers who are, figuring out which plane should be taking off and landing, if you will. What happens there is if people call in sick or if they're understaffed, then what happens? Less planes take off and less planes land. So delays that you could be seeing this summer or next year would be as a result of that. So I've been imploring Republicans, Democrats, anybody who will listen to me, make sure that you're hiring air traffic controllers, because it won't be unsafe, but they will be delayed and people will just be pissed off. So I think that, and by the way, they don't grow on trees. They train, it takes 18 months, 2 years to train air traffic controllers. So my hope is that the current administration, the Congress, will fund air traffic controllers, and the Democrats won't say, oh, it's a Republican idea. No, like they will say, yes, this is important to the airspace of America.
Okay, last question. You have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, is it just money? I mean, would seem to be that's kind of a crucial job there.
I mean, if I could divine for you what the Congress is thinking, I'd have a different job.
Okay.
I don't know what the issue is.
Okay.
I'm sure it's fighting about something else and not wanting to agree, but it is so clear to me this is like not a bipartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. You need trained air traffic controllers in the towers across the United States.
Okay, so before you go, you know a little bit about transportation, correct? Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So the final segment of the show today, I agreed to reluctantly because there's been a hue and cry led by Marjorie that even though I bought my Tesla before Elon Musk became the Antichrist, that I should sell my Tesla. Now, as a transportation, I will repeat, I bought it before.
That's right.
Yes.
He was as evil as he is now. Should I be forced by the listeners and Marjorie to sell my Tesla? Yes or no, please? Thank you.
So, as someone who hasn't owned a car in almost 14 years.
Is that true?
Really?
Is that performative or is that like a real deal?
But you were in New York City, so
Right. No, that's true.
that's why you can park more easily there than here.
So, we haven't a car. So the answer now, we recently bought a car for a second home, but whatever. I blame my wife for that, but no, I'm kidding.
Wasn't a Tesla, was it?
It was not a Tesla.
Okay, just checking.
No, it was not a Tesla. So I don't think I'm an expert on buying cars or selling cars.
Very much.
I don't think that's the only thing I'm not an expert on, maybe, or alleged expert, as this case may be.
Yeah, we actually call it Jim's Tesla.
No, is it in the parking lot?
What?
Is it in the parking lot?
It
right
is.
now?
I don't know where it is, actually, Rich. I'd love to tell you, but I can't remember where I put it. So
I'll put a bumper sticker. I'll put a bumper
Yeah.
sticker on it that says, "And my other car is driven by Phil Ang" or something like that. How's that? All right, so people
like
at least
that.
will be less.
Yeah.
Say hi to your mom for us, will you?
I think you just did.
I think I just did. Rich Davey, it's great to see you.
Thank you
Hope
very
you'll be
much.
back again
Nice to
soon.
see
I'd
you
love to.
again.
Thank you
Great to
both.
have you
God,
back.
what was the last time? Like 10 years ago?
It was a while ago.
It was a long time ago. I was
Oh
much.
my God!
Yeah,
We were so young
younger.
then.
We were all young.
Yeah, we were
older
all
than
younger
that now.
then.
Or
Okay.
younger than that now,
Thank
too.
you very much for
See
coming
you,
on,
Rich
Rich
Davey.
Davey.
Great to see you.
We've been speaking with Rich Davey, who is the CEO of MassPort, and we appreciate his time and for coming in again. I'm glad you're back from New York. Up next, the moment you've all been waiting for, 20 whole minutes dedicated to Tesla ownership and whether or not Jim should sell his car. Have you gone the way of Sheryl Crow and donated your Model S to NPR? Or, like Jim, are you considering slapping a Ford Focus bandage on?
For many, places of worship are also places to feel safe. They're a refuge. However, the Trump administration's hawkish stance on immigration has faith leaders and their congregations worried.
What are the plans if ICE does knock on the door right now?
Well, that's what I'm feverishly trying to figure out.
I'm Elsa Chang, how religious leaders are dealing with the threat of ICE raids on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked number 1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And the Skating Club of Boston, presenting the ISU World Figure Skating Championships with over 300 athletes competing at TD Garden March 25th through 30th for the title of World Champion. Tickets at isuworlds2025.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library tomorrow. Tesla faced 9 solid weeks of stock market plummets, only starting to rebound today. That was this morning. I have no idea what it is now. It's estimated that Musk's personal losses, this is amazing, over the past few years represents nearly $200 billion, primarily due to a drop in Tesla's share price in the last few months. I care far less about Musk's personal losses than I do about my own personal losses. And I know nobody wants to hear it, but if I traded in my Tesla, which I bought several years ago, I'd stand to lose about $30,000, Marjorie. Is that the price I should be forced to pay for my principles after spending hours collectively over the past 60 days railing against others for not standing up? So hear me out. I have a better idea.
I love this.
I came up with this morning, and I need an investor. I need some venture capital. It's like a bath fitter. You know that thing on television where they put the new plastic bathtub over the old one that's crummy? This is for Tesla. There's sort of new skins that make your Tesla look like a Highlander, for example, or a Buick. But here's the key. They only fit on Teslas that are at least a year and a half old.
Okay.
So the people who've bought the Teslas during Musk's demolition of America's government don't get to use them. And there you go. Our number is 877-301-8970. I know a lot of you, including Marjorie, want me to sell it. We want to hear from people. If you own a Tesla, are you thinking of selling? Have you sold? And for everybody else out there, what goes through your mind when you see a Tesla now? Or worse, that monstrosity of a Cybertruck? Do you look for the bumper stickers proclaiming some kind of anti-Muskness? A lot of people have bumper stickers or have removed, I think it's called the badge, the Tesla thing,
and they
either have
Honda
no badge at all or replace
Civic
it
or something like
well,
that.
that's disingenuous, but you figure you take it off, you take it off. So what should people like me do? And what have you done if you own a Tesla? And if you don't own a Tesla, as I say, what's your reaction to this form of protest? And including the protests at the Tesla dealers, like at the Pru, all the time. 877-301-8970 is
Is
the
it
number.
the Tesla fitter? Is that what you're going to call it?
That's why we'll call it the Tesla fitter.
I got one of those bath fitters. I think they're great.
You do?
Yeah, down the Cape.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, my parents' old house.
But isn't that a brilliant idea?
I think it's a brilliant idea. Just could put a whole thing over it and you wouldn't know.
Whatever it is. Well, my last great business idea, which went nowhere, which I also thought was brilliant, was shrink wrapping cars.
Yeah, but you were about 10 years too late.
Why? Who's doing that?
People shrink wrap cars for years.
Am I too late with this one? The Tesla fitter?
This could be your
What's
ticket,
my
Jim.
thing called again?
Tesla fitter.
Tesla fitter. Marjorie wants in. Believe me, she's not going to be part of this.
Okay.
877-301-8970.
People aren't that mad at you, Jim. Here's Becky in Mattapan. I have diamonds that were purchased when I was not aware of the mine conditions. I now buy only lab-grown. You can buy
They have lab-grown,
lab-grown
they do
diamonds.
have lab-grown
When you
diamonds,
know better, you do better. So keep that car, but do not buy anything else from Tesla.
What's that person's name?
Becky in Mattapan.
Becky, that's excellent.
Excellent point.
But you know what the problem, Becky, is? And maybe you can text another time. How does anybody know that I didn't buy my Tesla last week? Which is objectionable.
Well, I think you're
as opposed to 2 years ago.
Aren't you nervous driving around in it?
I'm a little. When Rich Davey asked me where my car was parked, I was.
Or if you go over to Market Basket, you might encounter a little hostility in the parking lot over there.
Maybe
people keying your car.
Someone was going to key my car. I was there Saturday, and I said, "Do you know who I am?" And they said, "That's why we want to key your car." No, that didn't.
Someone has keyed my car. I don't
They
know.
have?
Yeah, I don't
Your
know.
car?
All the way down.
What, they
the
thought it
side.
was a Tesla?
No, it's a Toyota RAV4.
I understand. So what happened with that?
I don't know.
Maybe they thought that was my car, but it's not a Tesla. Okay. By the way, this is brilliant. If I create the Tesla fitter, which I am looking for funding for, I'm not supposed to do this on the air, but if you want to invest in my company, if Trump can do it, I can do it. You should call me.
Yep.
Here is what the anonymous texter says. Do they make a similar product so Marjorie's car could look like a bus?
That's right.
Because
so
she drives in the bus
can drive in the bus lane on Huntington Avenue or Washington Street. Jim says, texter, don't let anyone bully you. Just spray paint on the side instead of getting the bumper sticker.
I bought this 2 years ago?
Yes, I bought before we found out Musk is a douche canoe.
I don't think you should say that on the air.
Oops, too late.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Zoe makes a good point. Jim, you were hawking your personal product 2 days before a congressional hearing into NPR's alleged improper sponsorship model.
That's right.
Well,
Don't do it, Jim.
In any case, 877-301-8970. This is a fairly serious, actual conversation.
It
I know
is.
Unfortunately, it's focused on me by Marjorie, but there's a larger, Sheryl Crow, of course she can afford it. Sheryl Crow sold hers. You saw that.
Yep.
And she donated. You know what she donated all the proceeds to?
To NPR.
NPR,
which
exactly.
Is very wonderful. Yeah, Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona.
Yeah.
He donated his. He got rid of his Texas.
He knows
Tesla.
Musk, by the way. Have you seen him do interviews? He's one of the astronauts, the twin brothers.
Yes.
He had a relationship with Musk, and so he knows him.
Well, he said that he did it now over Musk and his politics, saying, every time I get in this car in the last 60 days, it reminds me of just how much damage Elon Musk and Donald Trump
are doing
problem. To our country. So there you go, Jim.
Let's go.
Hasn't your whole joy of I know you say it's a great car, that you really love driving it, but hasn't your joy been impacted by this?
It has.
Don't you feel like you need to put a bag over your head or something when you're driving around so people don't recognize you? Because
what I've done to do that is to just sort of compensate for it. When I'm driving, I never order from Amazon. So I figure rather
that's
than
what I have
doing
to do. I have to quit Amazon.
By the way, I'm really, in all seriousness, I'm doing less. I'm not doing enough less, but I'm doing less.
I'm putting in one last big order, and then I'm stopping.
Lauren in Boston, you're first. Thank you very much for your call. We welcome it. Hi.
Hi, you guys.
Hi.
Before we get on this topic, I do just on a side note want to thank you for your silly banter, because I've always been able to navigate life and its challenges, but this whole political landscape has me so uncomfortable.
I know.
We're in the exact same boat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, this is Basket Case Central right here at Boston Public Radio.
Go ahead, Lauren. Thank you, though. It was nice.
Right with you. Right
Go
with
ahead.
you. So, Jim, I fully understand your predicament. My very best friend bought a Tesla when it was a fun and exciting thing to do, right? For the betterment of the environment and new technology. And he's in the same scenario as you are. He actually wants to buy a Rivian, but as he looks to sell it, he's going to take a bath.
Yeah.
So we were going to go, I have a little solution for you. We were going to go, or we did go skiing up north a couple weeks ago, and already driving up north with mass plates is a little problematic because everyone hates mass holes. So I said, look, we already are in this Tesla with mass plates. We cannot be in this Tesla with mass plates and a Tesla, the logo is on the car.
So what'd you do?
So he's like, I know. Well, I attempted to take cranberry pink electrical tape and put a big X across the Tesla on the outside and the hood in the back. And he walks out the door and he's like, no, that's not going to happen. And I said, okay, what about white? If I took white electrical tape and we covered it, would that suffice? He said, I totally support that. So what I think this does do is it lets people know, hey, bought it. Unfortunately, I own it, and no, I don't support Elon because, of course, he's gone off the reservation.
Well, it's not perfect, but it's a step. Thank you. That was an excellent story, Lauren. Thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Yeah, Lauren, thank you for calling. What's your product name? The Tesla Fitter?
Well, you called it Tesla Fitter.
Yeah, somebody says we should have a gym fitter.
Well, actually, this is even better. Anonymous Texas says, wait, Jim is inventing a Tesla condom. So that might make it sexier.
That's right.
A Tesla condom.
Another texter says, oh, no, Jim, don't sell it. Just tell us where you parked it. The listeners will take care of it for you.
Matt from Narragansett says, we need to host a giant knitting party to yarn bomb Jim's Tesla with a giant dickie. Alan and... By the way, all you need to do to make Margie laugh is say Dickie, and you're there. Yeah.
Somebody says you should hold on to your Tesla because when Trump and Elon break up, you will be fine. Eventually, they will break up because he's going to blame Elon for a lot of stuff, and so people won't blame him for all the stuff that Elon's done.
Alan Stowe, welcome to the show. Hi, Alan. Alan.
Hi, Alan.
Hello?
Hi.
Hello to you.
Hi,
You're on.
How you doing?
Great.
Great. I'm a Tesla owner, bought one about 2 years ago.
Me too.
I'm also a climate advocate, and one of the reasons I bought it is so I didn't have to fly. It was interesting listening to your last conversation. Airplane emissions, they're not good. So we drive all over the East Coast on our Tesla, and the charging system is fabulous. We love it. But now, what do? I've been thinking long and hard about that, but I recently saw a chart of all the automobile manufacturers worldwide and the percentage of their cars that they sell that are internal combustion engine vehicles. There's only one manufacturer that sells no internal combustion engines, and that's Tesla. All the other manufacturers, Chevy, Ford, Kia, they're involved in making those kinds of cars that are killing the planet. So what would I buy if I sold my Tesla? I am not going to buy one of these new Chevy vehicles because they primarily make their money from selling SUVs, pickup trucks, and I think they're in a worse category than Tesla right now.
Alan, that is a really, really interesting point.
I hadn't even thought of that.
It's obviously accurate that I haven't heard from anybody else. I thought where you were going when you mentioned you bought the Tesla so you could drive all over the East Coast rather than fly. You mentioned the chargers were great. For those who don't have an EV, you can fully charge your Tesla to maximum capacity, 300 plus miles, in like 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
That takes like 12 hours or more in a medium speed charger like the vast majority of other cars
built enough chargers for people that want to have
Alan,
non-Teslas.
thanks. That was a great call. And by the way, we mentioned the other day, who was here when we were talking about, Dan Primack, who business editor at Axios, is talking about the Chinese EV maker suggests that they have invented a technology that charges the car in 5 minutes, which obviously would revolutionize anything. What do people think about Alan's argument, by the way? I mean, there are obviously a lot of political problems, huge political problems with Musk and owning a Tesla, and I acknowledge that. I'm not trying to hide it. But every other car that has an EV, I think, does regular fossil fuel
well, a lot of them do hybrids too.
Well, but still,
they still use fossil fuel. No, I hadn't thought of that because I was waiting for them to get more chargers to get because I've had hybrids for years and they're really good.
Yeah, they are.
But they're not as good as the electric ones.
Rebecca, you're in Littleton. You're on Boston Public Radio. Hi.
Hi, first time caller.
Oh, thank you so much.
I just wanted to let you know, I saw a story, Jim, about, and I don't know the name of the car, it begins with an L, it's electric. They will buy your Tesla plus give you $20,000.
What?
So check it out.
Why would it do that?
I read the story. So it begins with an L, I know that, but I have to look it up and I'm driving. So
our coworkers are all over it.
Someone there can find
We'll let you know. Thanks for your first call and make another one. And as soon as we find out what that is, we will share that with people. 877-301-8970 is
Paul reminds us that he came up with the line Tesla la la, and he says because his reaction for Jim accepting this level of ridicule today, he doesn't care what you do with your car. And then another texter says the same thing, that if you weren't driving it, somebody else would be driving it. It's the least of our problems. But would I buy now, assuming I could afford it? No. Would I love to someday own an electric car? Absolutely.
So here's Polestar. Polestar is offering Tesla owners a $20,000 lease discount. Polestar is part of Volvo, I think, right? I'm pretty sure. On their new Polestar 3 SUV, consisting of a $15,000 clean vehicle incentive and a $5,000 whatever this means, conquest bonus for Tesla owners. Yes, they're part of Volvo. So there you go. Thank you for that call.
That's
it's not an L, but
that's
it
a pretty
is a
generous
P.
offer, isn't it?
Well, I don't understand it well enough to know, but
and
I
why
think
would
so.
they do that? I mean,
because they want you to lure you into the business, and even if it's a loss leader, maybe you'll keep buying Volvos or Polestars. I don't know. Where are we going?
We're going to Pat in East Waterbridge.
Waterbridge?
Waterbridge. Is it Waterbridge, Pat, or did we goof it up?
It's East Bridgewater.
Oh, okay. East Bridgewater. Okay. Well, we're
really
close.
sorry.
Close.
Go ahead.
Bridgewater State University.
Oh,
okay,
absolutely.
we do know. Of course we do. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So I own a Tesla, and the Tesla symbol on the back is really kind of basically glued on. So we get a heat glue. I'll be able to take. Not every Tesla can do that. It's going to take it off, and I bought a magnet that says "Never Again." So I'm going to put that on the back.
Wow.
Like it. Yeah. So Pat, I assume you feel less. How do you feel driving around in your Tesla before all that change comes? Are you nervous about it?
Not really. I mean, I bought it like Jim did. I bought it in the time of like we wanted to be green, and I wanted to do something for the environment. And now that Elon Musk is, the dictator number 2, I'm not real concerned. I think a lot of people understand, or they should understand, that people mostly buy it for climate reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Pat,
I don't understand why anybody would think.
Well, Pat, I'm exactly where you are, but I have to say, maybe a little more than you. I understand why people are upset with people like you and me. I do. I mean, if this is like a moot court argument at Harvard Law School, I think we'd win. But there's an emotional element to this because this guy is helping to destroy this government. And so I get it. Pat, thanks for the call.
You know what's
By
so
the way,
funny?
anonymous texters, this is very good news, says, I'm putting Jim's Tesla fitter business proposal together for him. Just want to confirm the proprietor will be Paul Weiss. Is that correct? If you didn't hear the first hour of the show, listen to it on the podcast. And you'll
I had a
understand
non-existent dead person going to the White House to talk about knuckling under to Donald
He's not
Trump.
a non-existent dead person. He's a very, he did exist.
He's dead.
He's dead.
Yeah.
Died in 1956.
Okay.
Whatever.
So it's interesting the way the Trump world has done a 180 on Teslas. They always made fun of, the latte drinking Tesla owners. But now, of course, since Elon Musk is having some problems, they've switched and they're full-throated.
Did you see the Secretary of Commerce actually urge people to buy Tesla stock?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard a public official in the history of this country saying buy a certain stock? That's days after Trump is selling Teslas on the front lawn of the White House.
So here's some sound of Fox News commentators. This time the gang at Fox and Friends, that's the morning show, is describing or imagining the types of people who show up to Tesla protests.
These people are rent-a-protesters. Yes. But they do not contribute anything to society. They don't buy things. They don't. They're not interested. They don't work. They don't have jobs. They just.
Can these people get any dumber than they are?
Do you know? This is one of the big Fox things, rent-a-protesters. Now, there was talk that Donald Trump rented
many
people that
times.
loved him when he was walking down the escalator at Trump Tower back in 2015, whenever it was. Riding the escalator down. Yeah. But, I mean, have you ever heard of a real, actual rent-a-protester?
Only one exception.
Yep.
As you know, Antifa rents protesters, so... 877-301-8097. Remember Becky? Becky was a listener from our old radio station.
Yeah.
You know how we know her? We took her to Bruce Springsteen when we gave tickets to listeners at Fenway. I think it was the first
She
Fenway.
made a great book for us.
So she's got, no, that's somebody else. That's Laura. That's close enough. In any case, what Becky is making is a bumper sticker. She just sent me a copy. Love the car, not the CEO. And she's going to send me one as soon as she has them done. So what do you think of that?
I think that's pretty cool.
Well, thank you very much.
It was Laura that made the great book.
I just said that.
And it's a great book.
It is beyond.
Yeah.
It's a scrapbook.
It's a scrapbook.
Of all of our years doing whatever it is we do for a living.
Andy in Sudbury, thank you for calling.
Hello, Andy.
Good afternoon. I've spoken to you guys before a couple of times.
Thank you.
And this time I wanted to, and I still love your show every bit as much.
Still.
Sometimes it reminds me of the old Saturday Night Live point, counterpoint.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
Jane, you ignorant slut. Go ahead.
Slut. Absolutely. So it's a real irony you're doing this today because just yesterday, my wife and one of our best friends said they were so angry and annoyed about the direction that Musk is going and what he's doing to the country. They gave away his Tesla, and he gave it away to, of all places, GBH for them to sell as part of a donation to them.
No,
really?
Is that true?
Wow.
I have to wonder if that's a bad deed or not, because the fact of the matter is now GBH is stuck trying to sell the car to somebody.
Huh.
Yeah, but they'll get some, but it is not worth nothing. It's just not worth what it was in days before Musk was held in disgrace, or whatever that term is.
We were very proud of him because he's loved his Tesla, and by the way, it is a spectacular car. There's absolutely no question about it. But he was so angry about the direction that this bastard is taking us in this country and what's going on, he just had to give it away.
Well,
hey,
Andy,
thanks
you
for
very
the call.
much
Read
for
that note.
the call. Both Rivian and Lucid also make EVs, so Tesla is not the only game in town in terms of 100% electric vehicle manufacturers.
Meaning they don't make any gas-powered cars.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
Obviously
go
neither
to
did I.
Karina in Winthrop. Hi, Karina.
Hi, Karina.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. I'm so glad you're taking up this topic. I'm also a climate activist, and I have to say I completely disagree with the caller who said, I'm not going to buy a Chevrolet or anything else. My husband and I just got 2 Chevy Bolts. They're fantastic cars.
Yep.
And if we all buy more of them, we will encourage the traditional car companies to move away from internal combustion engines toward electric cars. So anyway, I've been attending the Tesla protests, and they have been fantastic. And I hope you will mention that on this Saturday, there's going to be the biggest one of all.
You just mentioned it. Where is it? At the Pru?
The one in Boston is going to be right at 888 Boylston Street.
Yeah, that's the Prudential one.
That's the showroom.
Yeah, that's right where the Prudential building is. So, Karina, thank you for telling about this. Listen to this. Abby in Rhode Island. I have a 2019 Model 3 bought when I was working as a first responder during the pandemic. I recently looked into cosmetic enhancements to disguise my Tesla that Jim is talking about. Meanwhile, over the weekend, I was too concerned to leave my Tesla at the airport, and so I Ubered both ways just to avoid leaving it in public and possibly vulnerable to some sort of vandalism.
Should I start a GoFundMe for my Tesla condom? What do you think?
He wants to do like a bath fitter for his Tesla.
What do you think? Jared Bowen's with us.
Well, I have some questions.
Go ahead.
So,
I'm here.
one, if you have to bring your Tesla in for a repair or software update, who are you paying?
Okay, next question. Go ahead.
When you have your Tesla
Stupid
charged,
question. Yes.
Who are you paying to charge?
That's another question I refuse to answer. Go ahead.
Okay, and third, is your condom just so that you don't get spray painted, vandalized, keyed, all of the things?
That is correct. So I answer 1 out of 3 questions.
So
I will not answer any more.
So I think that this leads to you have to sell the Tesla?
Do you think I should sell a Tesla?
Well, I think it's difficult to drive around in, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say it's difficult. It's harder than it was. It's harder than it was before. I'd say that's true. So Jared thinks I should sell it. Marjorie is careful, even though she is causing all of this anti-Jim conversation to happen. She is carefully staying away from taking a position herself.
Well, because I do a lot of things.
Fostering
I
debate.
do some things I shouldn't do either.
Like what?
I haven't given up my Amazon.
You know what? I haven't either. I was thinking about
that.
That's
really disgraceful. So I'm not exactly Snow White here either.
You're not?
No, I am not.
Well, by the way, you know what I'm going to be selling on Amazon soon? The Tesla condom for $19.99.
Notice, by the way, Marjorie parks in spot number 2. I now take number 3 because I want to be as far away from the Tesla as possible.
That's right. Might contaminate you.
What are you doing on that show of yours?
So we're talking about this film, The Ballad of Wallace Island, with its stars.
Yeah.
It's coming out on Friday. This is a beautiful film. It's about this millionaire who has won the lottery, and he decides to spend his money by bringing his beloved folk duo, who has since disbanded, to his island for a one-person concert. And it is lovely. It was a huge hit coming out of...
It sounds fabulous. What's it called again?
It's called The Ballad of Wallace Island.
And who you having on?
The 2 stars.
Oh,
who
that's
also
great.
wrote
It's the stars on his show, Jim.
Yeah,
I know.
And it's the movie we all need right now. We're also talking about, this is a big week for Boston, the ISU World Figure Skating Championships are in town. This could lead to what we'll see in the Olympics next year. So we're talking to 2 figure skating champions. And then Mahesh Das of Boston Architectural College will talk to us about an architect who doesn't build for buildings to adapt to a changing future. They change with the future.
Cool.
Yeah.
Another great show. Jared Bowen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll check on your car when I go out to the garage.
Yeah, sell your Tesla so we can all rest easy while we're parked here at GBH.
I knew there was a selfish aspect to this.
Right.
Good to see you, Jared.
That's right. We might get caught in the crossfire.
1 minute left, Marjorie.
Oh, 1 minute left. Okay. Thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. We have a podcast. You can keep up with us 24/7. Check out our new TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow we're going to be live from the Boston Public Library with NBC Sports Boston's Tony Casey, Sky and Telescope's Kelly Beatty, UMass Boston Chancellor Marcelo Suarez Orozco, leaders from the Skating Club of Boston. Speaking of skating, CEO Doug joins us with Ashley Wagner, a retired competitive figure skater and Olympic medal winner.
Yep.
I know, that's very exciting. Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John McClaw Parker, our executive producer, Jane Bologna. Special thanks to Patrick Lally for running the YouTube stream. Stay tuned to Jared and the Culture Show, which starts immediately after us here on 89.7 GBH.
I just want to say,
what's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Celebrity Series, composer Caroline Shaw and choreographer Vanessa Goodman present the dance and music installation Graveyards and Gardens, live at Harvard Square's Arrow Street Arts, March 28th through 29th. CelebritySeries.org. They solve murders with blood, sweat, and tears. Literally. Watch the team of London-based forensic scientists do what they do best and catch Silent Witness tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGB.